Hello everyone, in this series we are building a full stack AI powered notes application which I call View Notes AI. Let me show you the finished product real quick. So we have a notes application where you can click, edit and also delete, which are standard stuff. But then when you click on summarize, and Gemini is going to go and read your notes and instantly is going to summarize and also generate the tags for you. But then there's this chat panel over here where you can type a question and the app is going to find your relevant notes and hand them over to Gemini AI, and then it streams back an answer to you in real time. So that's RAG, which is retrieval-augmented generation. And by the end of this series, you'd have built it yourself. So here's what you're going to learn. You will learn Vue 3, TypeScript, Tailwind CSS, Supabase, Tanstack, Stat, Query, and you would also have a full working CRUD app. We also make use of Supabase Auth, row-level security. We also have the database, which is going to enforce privacy, so not just the UI. And then we also have the first AI feature, which is Gemini, that is going to summarize and also auto tag your notes through a secure edge function. We have RAG, pgvector, embeddings, similarity search, and the streaming chat interface. So everything is going to be ready to publish and deploy live on Vercel, with everything definitely configured for production. So if you've been waiting on how to learn AI and actually how to get it integrated into a real application, this is the video for you. So if you're new here, do not forget to hit like, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. I look forward to you enjoying this video and seeing you in future builds. And if you're looking for a developer to build your SaaS, your startup or mobile application, AI application or full stack application, don't forget to check out my Upwork. The link is in the description below. I'm a 5-star rated freelance software developer helping clients to build modern production-ready applications using React Native, Next.js, Supabase, Node.js, and AI integrations. We're going to start up by scaffolding a new Vue.js project. I'll start by seeding into a place on my machine where I would like to create this new project. So I have this document and I have this projects work and I have this folder over here. And right in here, we would say npm create, and then we say view at latest, and then the name of our application, which I would call View Notes AI, like this. So do go on and execute this command. So npm create view at latest, the name of the application. I'll proceed, and definitely we're going to have some prompts such as if we want to make use of TypeScript, I would say yes. And it also tells us to select features which we want to include in our project. So we want to have, we're not going to select JSX support, and we're going to support router for the single page application development. We're going to make use of Vue router. Then I would, for now, skip Pinia for state management and VTest for unit testing and also end-to-end testing. I would select Lintia and also Prettier over here. Now, once you're done, you just need to press enter on your keyboard. And then it asks us to select experimental features we want to include in our project. So if we want to include Vue.js 3.6 beta, I'm going to include this so that we can already test out the latest features. But I would skip this, replace Prettier with OXMFMT over here. So I'll just choose this and send this. Now for the package manager, I'll just stick with npm over here, simple and straightforward. And it asks us if we want to skip all the example code and start with a blank Vue project. Maybe I say yes, or maybe you say no, but I'll just say yes so that we have a blank Vue project and we can build up our application from the ground up. So you want to hit on yes so that we have bare minimum project. And now we need to cd into the project, so into the Vue Notes AI application, and then open this up with Visual Studio Code. And in there we need to run the npm install. Also we need to run this npm run format, and we also need to run the npm run dev command. So let's open this up in Visual Studio Code or any code editor of your choice. So this is the generated application that we have over here. So let's run the npm install because we are already navigated right into this folder. So just go on and hit npm install, which is then going to install the different packages. We are going to have the package lock.json. Currently, we just have the package JSON, so we're going to have the package lock.json, and we're also going to have the node modules folder. So we'll give this a moment, and while installation is ongoing, we can come right into the package.json. Let's just have a view of the different scripts we have here. We have this format script, which is going to, run formatting, making use of prettier. We have this lint ox lint for linting. We also have this for type checking. We have the build only for the build. We have vit for preview. So when you run the build, you can run the preview, which is going to have the preview. And then we have the build over here, which is going to build the production application. And we have dev, which builds up the development application. So now this is done. For us to start things up, we can just run the npm dev command. So npm dev, which is going to run this dev script that we have over here, or maybe it's npm run dev. So let me just clear this. Npm run dev command is going to run this script and making use of vit, which is then going to give us this preview on localhost 5173. Now here we have it. Here is the application that got generated for us. The next step is for us to have Tailwind CSS right up in our Vue.js project. So let's have Tailwind CSS. I'm going to close this. I'm going to quit the dev server, and the installation command is npm install, and we need to install Tailwind CSS. And we also need to install at Tailwind CSS /vit. So run the installation. Let's have Tailwind CSS installed in our project. And then we want to come right into the vit config over here so that we can add right into the plugins. We want to add the Tailwind CSS, which will come from Tailwind CSS vit package. So here, let's bring it in. Let's import Tailwind CSS, which will come in from Tailwind CSS /vit. And here just below the view dev tools, which is this that you see over here, we have this view dev tools, which gives us like a layout view on how our application is structured. So we can see everything here. So we can leave that plugin, and then we want to register another plugin here, which is Tailwind CSS, just like this. And we can close this up here. Now, this is the first step in having things done, but we want to also update our source, the main.ts. In case you're new to Vue.js, you're going to also pick up Vue.js learnings along the way. We have this app.vue, and this app.vue here, you can imagine this to be the entering point of our application. And in the main.ts file, we import the app and we register the app right in here, just like this, inside the create app, which comes from Vue. And then we pass in the app. Now, why do we have this error over here? Because it cannot find this. No worries, it's there. And the next thing we're going to do is to then import Tailwind CSS. I want to have it right in here. Okay, so what we can do, actually not here, not in the main.ts, want to be in the main.css. If we do not have any main.css, as we do not have any main.css or any assets folder here, which you would maybe get when you make use of the boilerplate, we are going to create an assets folder here, and right inside the assets folder we're going to create the main.css here, and in here we want to then import Tailwind CSS. So we'll say import, I want to import Tailwind CSS here like this, and then we can save the content of this file. Now we have Tailwind CSS imported here. We just need to register it. So what we're going to do is right here in the main.ts file, we need to import this asset. So we can import it right here at the top here. We just need to import, and then we're going to go straight up into @assets, and into the assets folder we're going to have the main.css file over there. So that's pretty much the setup that we need to make this work. And we just need to verify that Tailwind CSS is working in the application. And if we come straight up into the app.vue file over here, so in here I'm going to delete everything that we have over here. And once we have them deleted, we're going to have this div. No worries if you do not get syntax highlighting here. We need to install Vue extension here so that we can get syntax highlighting. We're going to do that in a moment, but let's verify that Tailwind CSS works. So this div is going to take the class, and in here we can provide the different Tailwind CSS class name. As you see, we already get Tailwind CSS IntelliSense, so we can give this a height of screen, and we can also give this a BG of gray. Maybe we start with a BG of red, let's say 800, so that we are sure that it works. So BG red 800. And then in here, we are going to have our router, which we are going to set up in a moment. But for now, we can just have hello over here. And sorry, not hello like this. We can have a paragraph tag. And inside this paragraph tag, we can display, let's say, hello. So now let's give this a save, and let's come over here and just give this a refresh. We should see hello over there. We need to make sure that npm run dev is up and running, and here we just give this a refresh. we should see hello. So now we see hello here, and we have Tailwind CSS set up working correctly. So what we're going to do next is for us to set up router and also install the Vue.js extension and the marketplace so we can get syntax highlighting. So what we can do quickly is come over to the extensions marketplace and want to search for Vue. And you can see here, this extension is deprecated. We can use Vue language features Voila extension instead. So you want to click on this, and this is going to open up the extension, which is Vue official here. And then you want to install this extension, and you want to grant the permission for this extension to be installed right into your system. And once you have the extension installed, as you can see over here, you should now get syntax highlighting just like this. Okay, so I'm not going to reload the window. As you can see, it already works, but you can just refresh the window. And now I refresh the window, you can see everything still works like this. Okay, so now we have everything working. Next, we are going to set up routing, and setting up routing is actually straightforward. We're not going to set up the different pages yet, but what we can do, we see that this is inside this. We have this router and we have this index here. No worries, we're going to make some configurations here to set up routing more. But what we can do for now is in here, just right at the top, we need to, inside the script tag, we need to import the router view, which is going to come from Vue router. So here we're going to import router view. A router view is going to come from Vue router. And you can imagine this to be a placeholder. So right in here, we're going to have the router view. So if we are in the home page or the index page, or let's say the about us page, this router view is going to be replaced with the content of that template. Now I'm going to change this to what we need initially, which is bg gray of 200. So that's what we're going to have over here. And then we can save the content of this file. All right, so we see the bg gray, but we do not see any content because we have not registered any page yet inside this router index.ts. But before we continue, let's go over to Supabase and also set up a Supabase project. Okay, so over here in Supabase, so far we have been able to, start up a Vue.js project. We configured Tailwind CSS, we set up the main.ts file, and we just had the CSS imported right into the main.ts right in here. And we just didn't set up routing, but at least we did get started with routing. If we check the main.ts file over here, we already have this app.use router, which is coming in from this router index.ts file over here. And what we just did in here is in the app.view right here, is to just have this router view configured here. So we're still setting things up, and we'll see how we can configure this app.view right inside here when we go right inside here when we start setting up routing. Okay, so this is Supabase. In case you're not familiar with Supabase, Supabase is a full backend as a service, and with Supabase we can be able to spin up backend services without having or writing code for our own custom backend. So Supabase is going to give us so many things like a PostgreSQL database, authentication, storage, edge functions, things like that. You can see the different features that we have from Supabase: vector, real-time, data APIs. So let's get started with Supabase and see how we can integrate it right into our Vue.js project. If we come over to the dashboard over here, you need to create an organization. So I have 2 organizations created here, and then projects are going to be created within organizations. So this is this project that we have over here, this organization, and inside this organization we just have, okay, this is organization dropdown. We have different projects here, but we can create a new project, and I'm going to give this project a name, which is going to be the name of our application. I'll just go with Vue Notes AI like this as the name of the application. For database password, you can generate a strong password here. No worries, we can always see how we can get a new password if you forget these credentials over here. And this is enough. You go on and create the new project, and you give this Supabase CLI a while, and you'll be navigated over to your project dashboard, which we have been navigated over. You can see the status is healthy, everything is up and running, and then we can connect our application right up here. Now, before we connect Supabase over to our application, I just want us to create tables. In Supabase, we have different tables. We have the table editor here, or different ways of creating tables. Here you can create a new table here, and you can see this. You give this table a name, some optional description, row level security, which we are going to get into later. So you can disable row level security, and you can enable real time, and you have the different columns that belongs to this table, and you can also configure foreign key relationship. We're going to make use of the editor here, the SQL editor, because it's quite pretty much straightforward, and we can get started easy without the hassle of clicking through the table. So I'm going to bring in the SQL that we have over here, and we just have this straightforward SQL create table notes, and these are the different columns that we have in the table and the different properties of the columns. So the ID is a UUID and it's a primary key, and this default is generate random UUID function. It's a function that is going to assign a default random UUID whenever a new note is created. And we have the title, which is of text. Not null means the title is required. We then have the content of the note, which is a text, and we have the tags, which is a list of text, and we have the summary, which is text, and the created at, which is of type timestamps, and we are assigning a default, which is now function, which is current date time. Okay, you can notice here we do not have the user ID and the row level security. That's actually on purpose. I just want to get something quickly up and running, and then we can update this to have the user ID and also have row level security, where users that creates a node should only be allowed to update a node and things like that. So you can run this here, and it's notice the potential issue that I said we do not have row level security. It's totally fine. We are going to run this without RLS, and later on we are going to configure row level security right into this table. So we should see success, no rows returned, which we see over here. And if we come over to the table editor, we should see our new nodes table unrestricted because we do not have RLS, no worries, with the different content that we specified over here. Now we need to connect our Supabase over to our Vue.js project, and if you hit on this connect over here, you would see like the different framework where you could choose. In our case, we are making use of Vue.js, and you can see the installation where we need to install the Supabase client. We also see what we need for our env local, for our ut Supabase, and also our app.vue, how we can go on to use this Supabase client in our app view, or maybe any page that we have in our application. So we're just going to take this from the .env.local here. I'm just going to copy this and come back to our project. We're going to create the .env. It should be the roots over here. So you want to have this. I just want to collapse these. Yeah, so here we are going to have the .env file like this, and in here we're going to have our project, our vit Supabase. So we need the vit prefix over here, Supabase URL, and also our publishable key. So that's what we need to set things up, the different environment variables. We also need to install the package. So let's copy this and run the installation. So you want to open up your terminal, and right here in the terminal, you want to run the npm install at supabase/supabase.js, which is going to install the Supabase clients right up in our project. Now we have the Supabase client installed in our project. We can already go on to create the Supabase utils client. And in order for us to create the Supabase utils client, we have our source folder, and in the source folder, we can either create it by calling it lib or call it utils. I'm just going to call this lib, and inside here we're going to have the supabase.ts file, and then we just need to come back here and we need to take this that we have over here, this utils supabase ts. We just need to copy this and use the value over here. So that's everything we need for setting things up. Now we're going to go over to types. We want to make sure we have types. We just have the .env over here, but we need to provide some extra configuration so that TypeScript is going to be aware, and we can get auto type completion whenever we are making use of environment variables in our application. So what we're going to do is right here in the source folder, we're going to create a vit env definition file. So we'll have the vit, and then we'll say vit env like this, .d for definition, and the ts file over here. So in here, we're going to have the reference, and the types here is going to be the vit client, and we're going to have the interface where we import meta env. We have the read only, the vit Supabase URL, which is a string, and we also have read only vit Supabase, the publishable key, which is a string, and then we also have the interface meta, which is then going to be the read only env for the import meta env. Now this is going to give us auto completion whenever we want to make use or reference environment variables that we have defined in the .env file. So we have the vid publishable key and we have the vid Supabase URL, and then we have them here, and we have the interface defined right in here in the import meta definition, or the import meta interface. Okay, so now we have all of these set up. I'm going to close all these tabs that we have open, and one last thing we need to do to get things truly up and running is to have the type definition for the Supabase types, because we want to have auto completion. We want to make sure that we are referencing the types that we have defined right in here in our Supabase project. How do we get the type for nodes? We can, for one, manually define the type here, but this is going to quickly make us go out of sync. If we manually define the type over here, that means whenever we add a new column in here, we would have to come back to application and also update the type definition. So we are going to be managing TypeScript in two places of our application. We want to try and avoid that whenever we can. So what we're going to do, we're going to infer the types from Supabase, which is pretty much straightforward. And you need to have the Supabase client installed on your local machine. So you can say npm install Supabase -- save dev like this. Make sure you have the Supabase client installed, and once you have the Supabase client installed, we're going to make use of it to run certain commands, which is going to help us link the project that we have in our remote over here in our local environment, development environment, and you want to log into Supabase. I'm going to say npx Supabase login, but before I log in, I'm just going to log out. Maybe I have in a previous instance. I'm going to first say npx Supabase logout, and once I am logged out successfully, yeah, so now I'm logged out. I was not logged in, nothing to do. I'm going to log in now. So npx Supabase login, which is then going to guide us to log in. So I want to click enter, which is going to automatically open up our browser. So I'm going to hit enter here. It opens up the browser for me, and unable to create login CLI, we should retry. Now, if you get this error over here, it's pretty much straightforward. It says remove old access tokens and stuff like that. And over here on the dashboard, in the Supabase dashboard, you want to come over to your profile avatar over here. And right here, you want to come over to your account. And here you would see access tokens. And here where we have access tokens, we can just delete the previous access tokens that we have over here. So I'm just going to delete this token that I have over here. All right, so I've deleted all the token that I have over here. I will come back to the dashboard and give this another trial. So what I'm going to do is to say npx Supabase login again, and I'll hit enter for it to open up on my browser. So it also did open up here, and it looks like it worked this time around. So this is it over here. And now that we have this opened, I'm gonna just copy this code, and I'll use the code over here and execute this. And now once you have your verification code right in here, I'm now logged into the project, and we can also close this up and also close this up like this. All right, so now we are right here into the project. The next thing we're going to do is to link the project that we have over here to Supabase. It's actually a straightforward thing to do. You just say npx Supabase link like this, and then you say -- project -ref, and the project ref, if you come over to your Supabase project and you click on connect over here, this is your project ref. So you want to copy this, and once you have that copied, you just want to paste this here and send the command. So once you send this off, you're going to have the project now linked over here to that specific ID. So we'll give this a moment. And once you have it linked, the next step is for us to generate the types. Okay, so now it's linked, so we can say npx Supabase gen types, and then we say TypeScript like this. I don't think we need a project ID after doing this. I don't think we need a project ID. But let's also specify the source. So the source here is going to be inside the src folder, and then /database like this .types.ts. Now we do not have this database types.ts file defined, so right here in the source we need to have the database. Oops, it's a file, so we need to create the file. So database, I also have a typo which I'll fix in a moment, .type.ts, and let's make sure we do not have any typo. This should be database like this, and send this command. So Yeah, so you can see unknown command type for gen. Here, did you mean types? But we saw it got generated anyways over here. Actually did not get generated. We saw the error here. So I'm going to delete all of these and we can give this another try. So it's gen types, not type. So I'm going to clear this and we can go again. So npx supabase gen types and TypeScript, and the path is this source folder database.type.ts. So now you see it works. We have our database types pulled in here, and if you look for the different tables under the public schema, we have the tables here, and inside the tables we have the notes, and inside the notes here we have the different rows. So we have the contents and their types here, the created at, the ID, the summary, all of these. We also have the what would I call this, like the operation, such as insert and also update over here, the types that we are going to need. So this is working pretty much well. We have been able to sync our types directly from Supabase over in our local development environment. Okay, so what we can do next is here, let's copy this command. So this Supabase command that we have over here, we're just going to copy all of these like this, and want to have a script so that next time we do not have to manually type all of these out. So we're going to come straight up into the package JSON, and here under the script section, maybe just below build, we can have a gen type script like this. So gen column types, and here we can have the value, which is going to be this. So Supabase gen types TypeScript, just like this. And once we save this, let's try it out. So we can hover here and click on gen types again, and you should see now it should work. Supabase gen types TypeScript, and the output here is just going to update the content of the file. So we see terminal will be reused. We do not get any response. And if we double check our database types, we have everything here. All right, so this is working well. Now, before we go, I just want us to have one more type definition for the notes. For the type definition for the notes, right in the source folder, we're going to have a new folder which we'll call types, and in here we're going to have a notes.ts type. Now you can say, hey, we have this type, and why are we creating another type? You know, this is the type we are going to pick from these database types. As we have seen over here, this is quite a lot. We have the database type, we have the public. To avoid us whenever we want to make use of a type, to do this deep type nesting to just get access to nodes, we are going to have it defined in here. And you can see this database, we have so many types here, the schema and all of this. So what we can do easily is to have a sped type definition here that we can reference everywhere in our application, which is also going to reference the type in our Supabase, in our database type here. Okay, so let's go on and define the file. Actually, before we do, I want to rename this real quick. I want to rename this to be database.types, and I also want to update the package.json, and this is going to be database.types like this, and we can save this file. Now let's have the type definition for the notes. We're going to import the type database, which is going to come in from at database/types. We're also going to export the type note, and this type note is then, you see the nesting we're trying to avoid, because from database we have the public, we have the tables, we have the notes, we have the row, and we also want to have the note input. So whenever we are creating a new note, this is going to be a pick type from database, public, tables, notes, and set, and then want to pick the title and the content. So whenever you're creating a note, you will just need to provide the title and the content. So this is pretty much everything we need for getting started. Up next, we're going to set up TanStack query so that we can fetch data, use it for fetching data and also for mutations. We're going to go into data fetching. I'm going to close here and open up your terminal, and I'm just going to clear what we had previously, and let's make an installation for view query. So npm install at tanstack/view-query, which is the library that's going to help us to fetch data. So while the installation is ongoing, we need to create a query client. Okay, so it's done for me, and we can do this by creating a file inside the lib folder. We are going to call this file query client. So query client like this .ts file, and in here we're going to import the query client, and the query client is going to come from TanStack view query, And then we can export a constant query client, and this query client is going to be equals to a new instance of the query client that we have over here. Now we have this query client, we need to wire it up in our main.ts file. So here, the main.ts, the entry point of the application, this is where we register our application and we mount it here. Now what we are going to do right in here, where we have the app.use, we are going to have the use view query plugin, which are going to be importing from Tanstack view query, and we're going to register it here. So just after the router definition that we have here, we're going to say app.use, and this use is then going to take in our view query client, and view query plugin is going to come in from Tanstack view plugin like this. And then it's going to need in the options here, we can pass the query client, which is going to be of type query client that we just created. So this is coming from our lib. Now we're just going to shorten this to be like this, and we can save this. All right, so now we have this. We're going to create the library for nodes. This is where we're going to be fetching all our nodes, making use of the query client. So right here in the lib, we're going to create the nodes.ts file. We're going to start by importing Supabase. Supabase is going to come from our lib Supabase. And then we're going to also bring in the type of our nodes and our node input, which will come from our type definition. So our types nodes. Let's have the first function. This function, we can call it fetch nodes. So it's going to resolve to a promise of nodes list, a nodes array. So here we can say const data, and error is going to be equals to awaiting the Supabase call. And then we want to say from the table, which is a nodes table, we want to select everything, and we're going to order by created at ascending false like this. So let's have a check. Let's say if we do have an error, they want to throw the error, and then if everything is fine and good, we want to return our data. We're also going to have this function, async function create nodes, which is going to take in the input of type nodes input, and this is going to return a promise that resolves to the created nodes. So here again, we have access to data error, and we want to await the Supabase call, and from the nodes table, we want to insert the input. So this input over here, and then want to select and say dot single true star. We have the created data. If something goes wrong, we throw the error, but if everything is okay, we can return our data, which is the nodes. So we're also going to have a function to update the nodes, which is going to take in the ID of the nodes to be updated, and also the input, which is the data, and then it's of type nodes input, and we return a promise over here that resolves to a node. So const data error is going to be awaiting Supabase, and then from the nodes table, we can say dot updates, and we pass the input, and the matcher here equals where the ID matches the ID this function receives. We want to select the nodes and we want to return single here. So if we do have an error, let's throw the error, but if everything is okay, we return data. Now we have the last function to delete a node, which is just going to take in the node ID of type string and a promise that returns to void. We don't return anything. So we say const the error is going to be equal to await Supabase from the nodes table. I want to call dot delete, and the matcher here again is going to be equals the ID matches the ID, and if we do have an error, let's throw the error. So these are the different functions that we have. We're going to make use of our query client to be able to call all these functions that we have defined here. And now we are going to set up our first route. In the route, I'm going to close all that we have here, and in the router folder right in here in the index.ts, how can we register a route? We have this routes array over here, and right inside this routes array, we can return this object. This object is going to have the path as we see over here, and the path is /, which means the root page of our application. And after this, we are going to have a name, and the name here is going to be nodes. So this is the name, and then we are going to have the component like this, and the component is going to be a nodes view component that we are yet to define. So nodes view like this. Okay, so this nodes view component, we are going to register it in a view folder we do not have yet. So I'm going to copy this, and right in here, I'm going to import nodes view, which is going to come from @/views. We're going to create this right now, and then we're going to have the nodes view.view file like this. Okay, so let's have the notes view component, and right here in the source folder we need to create the views folder, and right into the views folder we need to create the notes view.view file. So here we're going to come right into the views and we're going to create the notes view.view file. And now we see the error over here is gone. We no longer have the errors and we have this view. So that means whenever users come to the root page of our application, we are going to render this notes view, and this name here is going to be unique to this notes view. So it has to be a unique name. Okay, before we lay out the notes view, this notes view is going to need to render a notes card. So let's define the notes card. So right here in the source folder, we're going to create a components folder, and right into the components folder, we are going to create the notes card.view file. Now inside this notes card, we're going to write some code that we might not understand. So let's just write it out, and then I'm going to walk us through the explanation as we go. So here, let's bring in the script with the setup, and then the language is going to be TypeScript. And we're also going to have the type where we import our notes, which is going to come from the notes type. Now we're going to have the script inside here. We're going to define the prop, and we're also going to have this emit function, which I'm going to explain in a moment. So we have define emit, and we have the edit, which is going to have the notes, and also the delete, which is also going to have the ID here, and we close the script. Now, before we continue, I'm just going to format this real quick. And I want us to understand something. So this is the Vue.js file. We have the script, and inside the script, you can go on to write some dynamic code, such as imports. We're importing our notes right inside the script, and then we define props. And this props is the props that this component needs. So that's how we define props. You can actually store this to a variable if you want to make use of it right into the script. So maybe for some data fetching or for some extra logic, you can say const props, and props is going to be equal to define props. And now you have access to props. You can come straight up in here and you can say something like props dots, and you can see you have access to props.notes here, which is the actual note. So maybe you want to do something with the notes before and have it in your templates. This is where you can do something like that. But we do not need to define it in props. So I'm going to get rid of this, and also the same for the emit. I'm also going to get rid of this here. Now, what is emit? Emit is like a subscription, and this note card, whenever it's used in this note view, we might want to have things like edit to edit a note, which are functions, or maybe a delete function to delete a note. Those functions are going to be defined right inside notes view, and then they can make use of the query that we set up here for notes to maybe update a note and delete a note. We do not want to have all of these in this component. We want to have it at the parent level. So this note card is going to have the card, and those card is going to define the buttons to handle the delete and also the edit. So the way it can expose those functionalities to the parent component is by having this subscription that the parent component can go on to listen on specific events. So click events, whenever the button gets clicked or something like that, they are going to call, let's say, the edit method. They're going to chain or listen to this edit event, and then they can go on to call the API, check some logic, do some validation and stuff like that. Okay, so I know it doesn't make much sense now, but let's go on and lay out the template, and then we see as we use it, and then we can go from there. So next, we're going to have the template definition. So we're going to have the div with all these classes definition over here. Going to have some shadow, some border, and also some padding, flex code, and a gap of 2. And then we're also going to have the H3, which is going to display the note title. So here we have semi-bold, text gray 900, and we have the notes.title definition here. And something you can see already is, hey, we are not returning the note, and how come we have access to the notes over here? And that's because in newer version of Vue.js, you do not need to return here. So automatically you just have access to the props over here, like the notes title, because you defined it right inside the script section. That is just a convenient way to reduce boilerplate code. And the same for we also have access to the notes, and we want to display the we want to display the text over here. So here we're going to have the notes.content. Okay, so after that, we're going to have this div, and this is where we want to display the tag. No worries, I'm going to explain this if what it is. Let's just have the template, and then we can walk through the code. So we have this span over here, and there we're going to have for off, and we want to have this something that looks like a for in loop. We also have this key with this tag over here, and then we have the class name. So this is going to hold the tag that we have over here with all this text. So it's going to have a py of 0.5 and also rounded full like this. And here we're going to have the tag just here. Then we're going to have the function, so the button, which is going to be wrapped inside this div. So the button for delete and also for edit. So here we have the button, and to register the click, we use this at click, and you see we're calling this emit here. I'm going to explain, no worries. And then we have the class name for this button over here, and we just give it a font medium. Then we have the edit, and that's the same for the delete functionality. Again, we're going to have the button here, and this button is going to register this at click. It's going to emit this event with the name of delete, and it needs the note ID argument, and it's going to have this class name over here, font medium, and then we can have the delete text over here, and we can close up the div and also close up the button, close up the div, and also close up our template definition. All right, so let's explain what's going on here. And this emit already shows us an error. That's because it needs to be $emit like this, and the same like this. So let's start from here. What is this? I think we've now gone through this. So here we have this button, and at click, this is how we register the event over here. So you see click takes in this here, where we have the payload, it's of type pointer event, and it returns void. So at click, we are calling this emit that we defined over here. If you hover on this, you see that it takes in the event. The event is edit because we registered edit over here. And we are saying this is going to take in this note argument. If you want to take multiple arguments, like let's say edit needs the ID of type string, this is how you define it. And you have an error here because you can see edit also needs an extra argument here. So if we say like this, it needs the ID here, which could be 2 or 3, whatever. So you see, that's where you can go on to chain, or if you want to have multiple arguments here. So I'm just going to revert this. So back to here, we call this emit. So we're emitting this with the edit and the notes over here. Now, how will the parent component be able to register to this event definition here? So no worries, we're going to see how that works. So we call the edit and the notes. And for delete, it's pretty much the same. At click, we also emit the delete, and we pass in the notes ID. Now I want us to take a look at something over here. We have this if. So this is like saying, hey, if the notes.tags over here .length, if this is true, then this, whatever we have here, is going to be displayed. Now, if we do not have any notes tag, we're not going to see anything over here. So it's more or less binding the display of this div over here to this condition. And then we want to map through the different notes tags that we have. So we say v4, which you can imagine to be a for in loop. So notes.tags, and we have the tag over here, which is a string, because if you come over here, you see here we have these tags, which is a list of text. So here we know it's going to be a list. And then we have access to the tag here, which could be the ID, so that Vue is able to optimize the display of this key over here, of this list that we have over here. And now we have access to this tag, which is a string. Now you can also make use of the ID. So you can say something like tag and IDX. If you hover on IDX, you see it's going to be of type number, because this is the ID. And if you want to use that as this key, you just say IDX like this. So I'm going to revert to this, and this is the v4. We have the binding over here. With the key is going to be the tag like this. Is actually a shortcut here to vbind in case you want to type it out full. So you can say vbind like this, and then you can say the key like this. Now you can see this is too much to type, and that's why the Vue.js team, you just have this key like this, which is like a shortcut here. Okay, so this is pretty much the explanation for the note card. No worries. Other components are going to be much more faster because some things here were more or less new to us. We're going to be working on another component that the notes view is going to make use of, and that is going to be the form components to be able to create the notes. And once we have that, we can then lay out the content of this notes view. Let's have this note form component. So here we're going to create inside the component folder, we're going to have the note form.view file. And there are still some learnings for us to pick up from here if you're new to the world of Vue.js. So let's get started. We're going to have the scripts. We're also going to have the setup and the lang. And here we're going to be importing ref and watch, which is new to us. They'll come from Vue. We also need to import our type. So the type of our notes and also our note input, which will come from at types/notes. Now we've seen how we can define props. So it's not new. We say const props is going to require us to define props. And we need a prop for editing a note, which is going to be of type note or null. Also for events, we're going to have the emit. We define the defined event for the submit, which is going to take in the data of type note input, and the cancel is just going to be a list. Then we're going to have the title, and we're also going to have the content, which is going to be equals to ref. Now you might say, hey, why don't we use normal JavaScript variables for this? Why are we using ref that we import from Vue? The reason being is because we are saying, or we are telling Vue.js, hey, we want you to keep track of this view, this title, and also this content variables. And this is what you can imagine to be reactivity. So we want whenever this data, the input or the reference to these changes, we want to update our components. Now we're going to use this for two-way data binding by making use of v model, which we're going to see how it works in a moment. But we want to also have a watcher right in here, which I'm also going to explain. So we're going to have this watch here. We're saying, hey, whenever the props.editing note changes, because it's going to be coming in from props, whenever it changes, we want to have access to the notes and we want to update the component instantly. So we're going to say if notes, then we're going to have the title to be the title.value and the same for the content. Otherwise, we're just going to default it to be an empty string. So we're going to have the else block here, else the title.value is going to be an empty string and the content value is going to be an empty string. And then we can also have a third argument here, which is immediate. We set it to true. So I want this to happen immediately, which is when this view node component gets rendered. We want Vue.js to be able to keep track, and that's how we're going to watch for the editing note that comes from the prop, so that we check our notes and want to update the title as well as the content. Okay, so let's go on. Let's have our handle submit function. So we're going to have the function handle submit. We're going to check for if there's no title, just some validation. We want to return. And then we want to emit the event, so which is going to be the submit event, and this is the title, and also this is the content. So whenever we click on handle submit, we are going to emit this over here. Okay, and then we can close this up here, and then we reset the title and also the content here, and then we can close up the script. Now we're going to have the template, and inside this template we have the form, and you can see the form makes use of at submit.prevent. We want to call handle submit. So we want to prevent JavaScript from automatically calling it, and we want to call the handle submit function that we have defined. Then we have the classes here, and in here we're going to have the different inputs. Okay, so here we're going to have these inputs, and we say v model is going to be equals to title, and we also have the type is going to be equals to text. The placeholder is going to be not title, and then we're also going to have some class definition here. This v model that we have here is the two-way data binding I was saying. So whenever the value changes, it's also going to immediately update the variable that we have over here. So there's the v model. We're also going to do the same for the content. Okay, so this is a class for the title. Let's have the text area, which is also going to have the v model. It's going to be equals to content. And the placeholder here is going to be write your notes, which is going to have a row. So let's say rows is going to be equals to 4. And then we can have this class over here, the border grade 300. We're also going to give it some rounded MD, some PX, PY, text SM, focus outline none, focus ring 2, also focus ring indigo 500, and resize none. All right, so this is the text area, and then we're going to have the button. So it's going to be wrapped in a div, a flex of and a gap of 2. So this button is going to have the type of submit, and then it's going to have this class name over here. So we're going to give it this BG here, and also give it a text of white, give it a text SM, a font medium, a PX of 4, a PY of 2, rounded MD, some hover states like this. And inside this button, we want to check, hey, editing note from the props. If that is true, we're going to make use of save changes. Otherwise, we're going to say add notes like this. Then we're going to have the button to cancel. So here we're going to say, hey, if vif is equals to editing note. So if we are editing a note and the type here of this button is going to be equals to button, at click, we're going to cancel. So we emit cancel event, and then we're going to have the class names for this button over here to cancel. So bg gray 100, bg text gray 700, text sm, font medium, px4, py2, rounded md, and on hover bg gray 200. So here I'm just going to have the cancel text, and that is, everything for this component. So we just close up the button, the div, the form, and the template. So this is our Vue.js component. Let me format this. And we have the editing note here for this button, if editing note, which is this here, or null. So if we have it, we're going to say save changes. Otherwise, we're going to say add a note. Okay, and then we have the button. So if editing note is true, we want to show cancel. Okay, to cancel and not go on to, submit. But this button goes on to submit over here. And because it's of type submit, whenever it's being clicked, this form over here, which calls the handle submit function, is then going to call this function and emit the submit event. So whoever is subscribed to it, this event is going to get emitted with this data over here. So the title and also the content. Okay, so we have the editing note here. We have the submit, which takes in the data, and we have the cancel here, which doesn't take in any data here. It just goes on to cancel whatever you were doing, maybe editing the notes and stuff like that. All right, so this is our note form component. I'm going to save the content of this here, just like this. And now we're going to have our notes view component. Okay, so I'm going to come over to the notes view, and let's start by having our script with the setup and the lang ts. And then we'll have our ref, which will come from view. And we're also going to import our use query, use mutation, use query client, which is going to come from at @stack/q view-query. We're also going to bring in the functions to fetch a note, to also create the note, to update the note, and to delete a note, which will come from our lib notes. What else do we need? We need the fetch notes. Okay, we need the notes type, so we import type notes and note input from our type. We also need the note card, which will come from our component, and we need the note form, which is also going to come in from this component. So the note card comes in from components note card, and the note form comes in from components note form. We're also going to have our query client. So const query client is going to be equals to use query client. And then we are also going to have the editing notes, which is going to be equals to this ref here, where we have the note or null, and initially it's going to be null. Now to fetch data, we have const data, which we can rename to notes. We also have is pending and error, which we rename to is error and error over here. Then we have the use query with the query key and also the query function. Now this query key we have over here is used for caching purposes, so it caches this specific query with this key, and we can use this to invalidate the query, to rerun the fetch, whatever. So this automatically binds it to this function that we have over here. And here we have the data, is pending, is error, or the actual error here. And the next thing we're going to have is the mutation, which is going to help us to call the query over here, which is going to help us to call the create note. So this create note function. So let's have it. Let's say const create mutation is going to be equals to use mutation hook. And here we pass the mutation function, which is going to be our create note. And then we can have on success want to invalidate the query. So we're going to say query client dot invalidate query key. And we're going to invalidate queries. The query key is going to be in notes like this. And that's what I was saying. Here we use this query key, we tie it down to this function, and when we say invalidate queries, it means we want to purge the cache. We should have fresh data because we just created a node. So do go on and rerun this query that we defined over here. Now let's continue. The next is to delete update mutation. It's pretty much the same. This is going to take in the mutation function. And then it's going to take in the ID and the input, which is going to be of this type for the ID, and the input, which is going to be of type note input. And then we're just going to call the update note and pass along that ID and the input. And on success, we have the function. We want to call the query client dot invalidate queries, also the query key of notes. And then we want to also make sure that our editing note value is going to be equals to null. So this editing note that we have over here, because we just updated a note. And the last we have is for delete mutation, which is pretty much straightforward here. We just have the mutation function. We pass the delete note, and on success, we have the function where we invalidate the queries for the notes. So we call the query client.invalidate queries with the query key of notes like this. Okay, so let's have more functions. This function is going to help us to handle submit. It's going to take in the form data, which is of type note input. And if editing note.value, we want to then go on to call the update mutation and want to say .mutate, where we can pass in the ID of type editing note.value.id, and the input is going to be of type form data here. Otherwise, we are going to call create mutation.mutate and pass in the form data. Okay, so let's also have this function to start edit. It's going to take in the notes, and here we can pass editing note.value is going to be equals to notes. And same, this function to cancel edit is going to take, just say editing note.value is going to be equals to null. And the last is to delete, handle delete. So we're going to have handle delete, which is going to call the mutation or the delete mutation dot mutate and pass in the ID. And now we can finally close our script. So all of these were defined right inside the script section here. We had our query. This is to create mutation, to update mutation, delete mutation, handle submit, start edit, cancel edit, and also handle delete. So here we can then have our templates. Pretty much straightforward at this point because we have gone through mostly what we have seen here, and we see something new, we're going to explain it. So we give it mx auto py of 10. We also have the h1 here, which is going to display the text of notes, view notes AI like this with this margin button. And then we're going to have our notes form. So no worries, this is where we're going to have a little bit of explanation. Because of this editing notes, we pass the edit note to it. We're also going to have at submit, it's going to call handle submit. And then at cancel, it's going to call cancel edit. And then we're going to have this div over here. And inside this div, we want to check hey, if it's pending. Let's go on to display loading notes. If it is pending, we want to display this text here that's going to say loading notes. Else if, so we want to say p here and say v else if like this. If there is error, we want to display the error message. So we have this class name over here, and in here we're going to display the error loading notes and want to display the error dot message. Now we want to also check another else if over here. Want to check the notes dot length. If that is equals to 0, that means we do not have any notes. We are going to tell the user to, or we're going to prompt the user to add their first note. So here we're going to say no notes yet. Add your first one above. Now finally, we can just say v else like this. We want to display this div over here. Now this div has these classes, but we are going to render our note card here. And this note card is going to take the v4, which is the note in notes. And then the key is going to be the notes.id. The notes here, so we're doing this binding over here, is going to be the notes. And at edit for the event, we're going to call start edit. And at delete is also going to call handle delete. Okay, so we're seeing some new keys here. So let's quickly go through it before we check how application looks in our UI. All right, so here, let's start from here. We have the template, and this template here, we're saying, hey, editing note. If you come into the note form over here, so I think this, we have this props that is expects. So this editing note prop, which is of type note or null, and you see it's of type note. So here we pass in the editing note, which is of type note. Now this editing note we are passing from here. If we come right up here, we see where it was defined just here. Now this is a ref that is of type note or this. Now initially it's going to be null. So here we have editing note, and the initial value is going to be null when we pass it to here. And then when do we update the value? So here we have the editing note. Now this value to show the form and pass the note is not just going to be handled automatically, because over here we have the start edit, and you can see this start edit goes on to pass the value of that to be the note here, because it's going to receive the note. And you also have the cancel, which is then going to set the value to null. Okay, so where does this, or where do we set this value? It comes from the note card. So here in the note card, you can see here we have the edit, which emits this event over here, the edit event, and it passes across the note. Now the parent component here with this note card, you can see here it's changed with this, if we come over here, this edit and delete events. So what it does is here we have at edit, so it's looking or it's waiting for that actual event, it's waiting for that subscription to be called. So whenever the start edit is called, it goes on to pass the actual note here, and editing note then gets assigned. So this editing note reference that we have over here then gets assigned the value of the note. Now once it gets assigned to the value of the note, over here in the note form, where do we have the note form? So over here where it passes the value, this is going to update. So the prop here is no longer going to be null. And that's why this note form is always watching over here for the prop.editing note, so that it can update the title as well as the value. And this handle submit goes on to call submit. So whenever we edit, we go on to emit the submit. And over here, what happens whenever we click on submit, because this handle submit is changed to this form over here, and this button here is of type submit. So whenever we submit over here, we call the handle submit, and this handle submit, if we trace this, goes on to check if the note value, then it calls the update mutation, and it passes in the ID and the input. And if we check update mutation, that's what it needs. It needs the ID and the input. So the same thing works for the delete mutation, which we have the handle delete over here. It gets passed to the note card, and when it gets passed to the note card, it calls the delete mutation, and over here you can see we have the delete functionality, which emits the delete over here. Okay, so now we are clear on how view template works, how we can pass in props like this. So this is the prop. We are binding notes prop over here to be equals to the note prop. We are saying the key over here because we are in a loop. We want to loop through the different notes and want to display the note card component. So that's why we have this over here for the loop that we are currently in. So we have the key, we pass in the prop, and here we have the event. Now something that might look strange is this vf, velse if. So we are saying, hey, if we are loading, we want to show pending. Else, if there is an error, we want to show this. So that means we are not pending. That means there's an error, we want to show this. Otherwise, that means if this condition also is not true and there is no note, so we do not have an error and we are not loading, but we do not have any notes. So this is what we are going to see now when we start up our application. We are going to see add your notes, add your first note above. But if we do have a note, then we're going to display the note card components. So we're going to see this, which is going to prompt us to add a note above. And then we're going to have our note form. And this note form that we have over here is going to display the input and the text area. And whenever we click on submit, it's going to create a form for us. So it's going to emit submit for the title and the content. So we submit, it's going to call handle submit. And then when handle submit gets called, we come into here. This is our note form. Then it's going to call handle submit over here. And handle submit, I just save the file. It's going to check, hey, if there's no note value, that means we are not in edit mode. It's not going to run the edit. Otherwise, it's going to run the create mutation, passing the form data, and this create mutation is going to go on to create a note. And we know create a note goes on to create a note in Supabase. Okay, so this is everything we have. Let's test it out. I'm just going to clear this, and we can say pnpm or npm start dev like this, which is going to start up, or npm run dev. Sorry, I've been working across Nest.js, and so been mixing things up. So npm run dev like this, which is then going to start up our Vite application. And if we come back to our project and it reloads, we see our view notes. So this is going to where we could add a note, and then this is where we can, this is the condition that we see over here because we do not have a note. So right here, we see this. But the moment we add a note over here, so the title is learn view, and the note is this is first view course, and we add a note over here, we're going to see it render here. Now let's try to edit. I'm going to click on edit, and we're going to see the form now populates with the values, and I'm going to add some exclamation mark. And once we save changes, we see the exclamation mark over here. All right, so this is working as expected. Now we're just going to add some authentication and also role level security. I'm going to close all these tabs that we do have open, and we are going to create a new folder for authentication. Now we're going to call this folder composable. You can imagine this to be called hooks, as you would call it in React.js, but over here we call it composable like this, composables. Now the idea is the same. It's just going to be reusable code, or code that we put together, units code that we put together to have one functionality. And in this case, we want to make use of authentication. We want to have our authentication logic here with Supabase. So we're going to call this use auth like this, which is actually a naming convention. You always make use of use like this as you'd go with hooks. So right here in the use auth, let's import ref from view. We're also going to be importing our type, which is going to come from session user, which will come from Supabase.js. And then we are going to import Supabase. This is actually going to come from our lib. So at lib/Supabase. Okay. So now after the imports, we are going to have define our session, which is going to be making use of ref. We are going to have here. So we're going to define our session, also our user, and also is initialized. So we want to have them here so we can actually update the session, and that's why we are making use of ref, so that we can update the values of the session, which is going to be ref. So it's going to be of type session or null, and same for the user. It's going to be of type Supabase user or null, and is initialized is going to be equals to ref, which is going to have a default value of false. Okay, so after this, we want to go on and load session that exists, let's say in local storage, once our application starts up. And to do that, we're going to have the async function init authentication. We're going to have our data, which we are going to destructure by awaiting supabase.auth.get session. And then the session.value is going to be equals to the data here, data.session. We also want to check the user.value is going to be equal to the data.session.user. Otherwise, it's going to be or null. And then we set is initialize.value is going to be equals to true. So this is going to help us to initialize the auth. We have the user here. So the user from the ref, you can see you have the ID, the AUD, because it could be of type user, which is which are the properties that you get from Supabase user, or it could be null over here. So we're going to set the ref value. So it's going to be the data.session.user. Otherwise it's going to default back to null, and is initialized is going to be caused to true. So that's if you're able to get the session from Supabase. Okay. All right. So the next step is for us to call the on-auth change. We want to listen to the subscription whenever the authentication changes. So let's have that. We're going to say supabase.auth.onAuth change is going to give us the event and the new session. And with that, we can say the session.value is going to be equals to the new session, and the user.value is going to be the new session.user, otherwise .value. So we want to keep the session and the user in sync whenever a user signs in. Let's also have the async function for sign up, which is going to take the email and the password. And then we can destructure error if something goes wrong. We want to await supabase.auth.signup, where we pass in the object. It has the email and the password. And then we just check if we have an error. Then we can go on to throw the error. We're going to also have the same another async function for signing in. So the sign in is going to take in the user email or password. And let's also watch out for error. So we're going to destructure error just as we did for the sign up. It's going to be equals to await supabase.auth.signin with password. It's going to take in the object for the email and the password. And if there is an error, let's throw an error. Now the last one we are going to have is for the sign out functionality. So async function sign out. And then we can say const error is going to be equals to await supabase.auth.signout. And then we check, hey, if there's an error, let's go on to throw the error. Now we are going to export all the utilities. So export function, use auth. We are going to return the session. We're also going to have the user object is initialized, which we are setting to true. By default is false. We also have the init auth, the sign up function, the sign in function, as well as a sign out function that we have defined over here. Okay, so this is the function. We're going to make use of this in setting up our authentication. Now the next step for us to do is to call the init auth whenever our application starts. No worries, we're going to go back to Supabase just to check up for the email and password authentication. Now, pretty much straightforward. Let's come over to the main entry point of our application. So over here, and I didn't really explain this much, but here we have the plugins that we register over here. We also have our router we register here. We mount the app. Over here we have the index.html, which has the ID of app. So it mounts it over here in the HTML and then replaces the content with our application here. And here we also have our router. Okay, so yeah, so over here we want to go on and call our init authentication so that it goes on to load the existing session. That's what happens whenever we call init auth. It gets or it tries to get the session from database, and it populates the user and the session that we have over here, and then it's also going to set its initialized to true. So this is the best place for us to call it. Just right after here, we're just going to call, we're going to say const, and then we're going to get this, which is going to be coming in from use auth, and use auth is going to come from our composable. So we're just going to bring in init authentication from here, and here we want to await init auth just like this. So it's okay that we're calling this first over here because we want to load any existing session before the router goes on to start displaying the pages, so in case we want to guard against routes there. Okay, so now we have this saved. Let's just quickly come over to Supabase. And here in Supabase project, if we check the authentication section of Supabase, we have the sign in and providers. And over here, we just want to go over to the email provider, which is usually the first over here. You want to make sure it is enabled. So make sure it's enabled here. And then you want to disable email verification. So that should be somewhere here. And yeah, so over here, email confirm. We want to toggle this off and we want to save these changes. Okay, so we do not want to go through the hassle of email confirmation as we are in development. We just want to have things easy. And now you get the confirmation. We can proceed over to our code base. And the next thing we're going to do over here is to create our sign up and our sign in view. Let's go on to have our login view. I'm going to close all these tabs that we do have open, and this is going to be pretty much straightforward. In the view, we want to have the login view.view file. All right, so let's not waste any more time. Let's have the content. We're going to start with the script, the setup. The lang is going to be ts, and then we're going to import ref from view. We're also going to make use of use router, which will come from view router. And we're going to bring in our use auth, which will come in from our composable use auth. Then let's have the router definition. We're going to say const router is going to be equal to use router. And then we can destructure sign in from our use auth composable. And let's have some reference here. So the email is going to be use ref or empty string by default. Same with the password. We also have the error message. It's going to be an empty string by default. Is submitting is going to be false. And then we're going to have a function. This function is going to be called handle submit, which is going to try to submit the form to log the user in. Okay, so we have the error message.value is going to be an empty string. Also, is submitting.value is going to be true. And in our try catch block, we're first going to await sign in, which will get from use auth. We pass in the email as well as the password, and then we want to push the user to the root page of our application. And for the catch case, we're going to set the error message.value to be, we're first going to check if the instance is error, then the error.message. Otherwise, we're going to have this text over here that is going to say something went wrong. And then finally, we are just going to set is submitting.value to false. So this is our script tag. And now we have our script done. This is pretty much straightforward what we are doing here. We have this use router hook over here. And over here we have the router, and we can programmatically navigate the user to this path. And we know that path has been registered in the router. If we come over to this router here, and over here in the index, this is the path. So it's the component for the nodes view. Okay, so and then if there's any error, we have the error.message, and it's submitting is going to be false, regardless if it was successful or if there's an error. Okay, so this is just the script. Now let's quickly have the template. In the template here, we're going to have this div with the classes so that we can display the sign-in form for the user to input their email and their password. And then we're going to have the form over here, and this form will have the @submit.prevent, where we call the handle submit function. And we can also style up the form by giving it the classes with full, max with SM, BG of white, and rounded LGs, shadow SM. So we're going to give it all these classes. And let's start with the H1. So inside this form, we're going to have the H1, which is going to have also some classes. And then we're going to have the text that says login to ViewNotes AI, which is the name of our application. And then we want to have the input for the email. So we have the input, which the V model, two-way binding equals to email. And then we have the type. The type is also equals to email, and the placeholder is equals to email. We are going to make the input required. And then we give it some classes. Just these classes over here: border gray, 300, rounded MD, px3, py2. So pretty much lots of classes over here. And once we are done with that, we can then have the same for the password. Okay, so that's it for the email input. Next, we're going to have for the password, which is going to have the same V model for the password, and the type is going to be equals to password. The placeholder is going to be equals to password, and this input is also going to be required. So here we have required, and we're going to give it these class names over here. Okay, so after the input for the password, we want to have our if in the paragraph. Just in case something goes wrong, we already have the error message that we defined in the submit. So what we are going to do, we are going to say this paragraph tag if we have error message. Remember, it's an empty string by default. So if it's no longer an empty string, we are going to display this error message over here. Then we are going to have the button to submit. So here we're going to have the button is going to be of type submit, and then we have disabled is going to be equals to is submitting, so this is v binding over here, and then we have the class, which also is going to take in all these class names over here. Now inside this button, we are just going to display the text like if the user is submitting the form, we want to say logging in. Otherwise, we're going to display the text of login. Okay, so let's have the text over here. We're going to say is submitting. Let's display logging in. Otherwise, we just display login. And then we want to have the link, which is going to take the user back to the sign up page, because the user, this is the login page. So here we have the paragraph, and then we're going to prompt the user like no account. That means I want to take the user to the sign-in page, and we do that by making use of this router link. And this router link, we have these two property that we can assign. So the path, which is /sign-in. Okay, so the destination, and then we can style it up like this. Okay, so now we have this component done. We're going to do the same for the sign up page. Okay, so for the sign up template, so we can save this, and let's come over here and let's create another view, and this view is going to be sign up.view like this. The sign up view is pretty much identical to the login view, so I think we can just copy this and let's reuse this over here, and I'll paste this in here. So we're going to make some changes. Where do we start from? The script. Do we have an error here? No, we do. Let me see. Component name sign up. Yeah, that's because we need it to be sign up like this, sign up view like this. Okay, so we can save this, and what do we have? We have the router, we have the sign in. We're going to update this. We need to make use of sign up, which will come from our composable use auth. And we have our ref for the email password. The error message is submitting. We also want to have the success message, so const success message, and success message is going to be ref, and it's also going to be an empty string by default like this. And here we are going to reset the error message is submitting, and also the success message we are going to give it dot value, and the value is going to be equals to an empty string like this. So success message dot value, and the submitting is false. So with the try block, we are going to be calling in sign up, not sign in, and then we're going to pass in the email and the password value like this. And router.push, we're just going to set the success message dot value, and the success message dot value over here is going to be what? It's going to be, let's say, something like it's going to be something like account created, you can now log in. Maybe we programmatically redirect the user to the login page, whichever you prefer. And the next thing we can do in the catch block, error.message over here, we can just leave this something went wrong, and it's in the finally block we set is submitting to false. Then we have the template. It also has handle submit, which calls this function over here, the handle submit at submit.prevent. We have the input for the email. It can stay as it is currently, and we also have the input for the password. Now let's change this. Rather than say log in, let's say sign up, or maybe create your view notes account, something like this. And then we have the input for the email, the password, if we have an error message, we want to display the error message. And we're also going to do the same for the success message. If we have the success message, we also want to display the success message over here. And rather than go with a text red of 500, we're going to go with a text green of 500 like this, or maybe of 600, text green of 600 like this. Now we have the button. If it's submitting, we want to show creating account like this. Otherwise, we display the text of sign up. And over here, we display not sign up. We're going to display like already have an account, already have an account. We want to take the user to log in like this. And this is going to have the text of login. Okay, so let's save this. Why do we have an error? Because we are not making use of router. So let's get rid of it. We do not need the view router over here. Now, the next thing we are going to do is to create our router guard. So here we have the router index.ts. We need to make sure that we are protecting this page, the node view component, whenever a user is authenticated. We do not want authenticated users to be able to visit this page. And we're also going to register the login and the sign up pages. So let's have our guard. Let's register the two pages that we have for authentication. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to bring this down 2 more times so that we can have the login view and the sign up view. So this is going to go to /login, and the name over here, we're going to give it a name of login, and the component here is going to be the login view component, which has been imported. And this is going to be /sign up. And the name here is going to be equals to sign up, and the component is going to be our sign up view. Okay, so now we have this. This isn't enough. What this means is we can start up our application, npm run dev, which is going to start up our Vite application. And once we come back here, we can manually visit the /sign up, so /login page, and also /sign up page. And we see the content of these pages. Now we can also come here. So the root page of application, which shows us our Notes AI application, and we want to have a guard. Now what's going to happen is we're going to type out this guard, and then I'm going to walk us through with the explanation. So we're going to have router.before each, which is going to run before each route. It's being rendered here. So we have the 2, which is like the destination. And here we make use of our use auth, want to require the user is authenticated. So here we're going to set 2.meta.requires auth. We haven't set up this meta, so it might be confusing. No worries about that. So we're going to say if requires auth, and there's no user.value over here, we want to return the name of login. So it's going to return that page. So it's like going to act like a guard. So if we do not require auth and user.value is true, and if this is true and the to name is equals to login or sign up, we want to return the notes page. So this is more or less like saying, yeah, so let's walk through it. So this is more or less like saying if there is no require auth, which for now looks like a magic text because we do not have it anywhere. We're going to add it in a moment. So, but if this is true, and we have the user.value over here is true, so that means require auth. Sorry, this is false, so the page doesn't require authentication. And user.value, that means we have a user here. If that is true, and the to name, which is the destination, is equals to login or sign up, then we want to return the notes page of our application. Okay, so we just need to have this require auth. Now the good thing about it is Vue.js, Vue router, gives us access to metadata, which we can go on to add extra properties to a specific route. Now this is where we can have the requires auth, and this requires auth, we are going to set it to true for this notes page. So what this means is you need to be authenticated to be able to visit this page. This doesn't automatically, because we gave it the name of require auth, it could be anything. It could be require authenticated, any name of our choice. But this meta is is going to be attached to the record, which in this case is this component over here, this method that we have here. So we can copy this, and we can also have the same for the login view. Now this is going to be a public page, so require auth is going to be false, and that's the same for this over here. Require auth is going to be false. So if require auth, let's also import this from our composable use auth. If require auth is false, as it is in this case, where requires auth is false, that means this is a public page and there is a user. So there's a user, and the user is trying to visit the login and sign up page. Then we take the user over to the notes page. Okay, so we can save this and we can try out this logic already. So now if we come over to the end, you see the user is now here. So if we come back here, we are redirected back to the authentication pages. And that's because of our guard that we have over here. The router dot before each is going to get called before the page goes on to load, and this check is going to go on. It's going to check if it requires auth and there's no user value. That means we do not have a user. We should go over to the login page, and here if there is no this is false and the user.value, that means you are authenticated and you're trying to visit the login or the sign up page. We want to redirect you over to the notes page. All right, let's test out the sign up. I'm going to go with a test@test.com email and with any password here. And once we sign up, you should see we're going to get our success message here. Account created. You can now log in. And once we come over to login, we are now redirected automatically to this page. And the reason why is because we tried to visit the login page and we are now automatically redirected to the root page of our application. Okay, so now we have this done. We need a way to sign up. So we're going to add a sign out functionality to this page. So let's have it. Let's come over to the notes page. So here, let's come over to the notes view page. And I think we can have it somewhere here. So maybe somewhere here we can have the sign out functionality. So let's bring in this JSX that we have over here. So this div, which is going to have this class, and then we are going to have our notes here. So I'm going to get rid of this. So our H1, which is going to have the classes over here. And then we're going to have the button, which is going to call the handle sign out. So we do not have the handle sign out functionality. We're going to have that in a moment. So we have the button at click, we have handle sign out, and then we're going to give it these classes over here: text SM, text gray 500, hover, I want to give it text gray 700, and then we have the sign out text over here. We can close up the button and also close up this div. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to delete this. And yeah, so it's screaming we do not have the handle sign out function. So inside the script over here, so maybe somewhere here, we can have the function. It's really an async function. Oops, an async function. And this function we call handle sign out like this. And let me fix this. So this is our async function, handle sign out, and we're just going to await sign out. Sign out is meant to come in from our function. So sign out like this. I want to push, sign out. I would then want to push the user. So we're going to say router.push. I want to push the user over to the / login page. Yeah, so we have this error over here because we do not have sign out. So do we have our use auth here? Nope. So let's bring it in. So we're going to say const this is going to be equals to use auth here. So we'll bring this in, and here we can import sign out like this. We also need to initialize our router. So const router is going to be equal to use router, which will come in from view router here, and router.push is going to take the user over to the / login path. So I'm going to save this, and now if we come over to the view note page, we see the sign out functionality. We can sign out, and then we are back here, and we can say test@test.com and provide our password wrong, and then the right one wrong, and the right one this time around. We are now here. Okay, so we're going to add row level security, and we're going to start by making some changes to the different tables that we have. Right here in the notes table, we want to have the user ID. So you can see currently we do not have the user ID. We're going to be writing the raw SQL for that. So we'll come over to the SQL editor here, and I'm going to be bringing in the different scripts that we're going to have. So I'll bring this in. We're going to alter the table notes, which means alter the notes table. We want to add a column user ID, which is going to reference so the foreign relationship, the auth.users. So hey, you might say, where do we get auth from? We did not define any auth over here. So where is auth coming from? That's because if you check this schema public, we have this auth, and this is what Supabase makes use of internally. And if you check the tables, we have the users table. So this is what we are referencing, and we have this user that just authenticated, that we just authenticated here. So that's what we are trying to reference in our SQL. So you see the auth.users and the ID, which is going to default to the auth.uid. Now, once we run this, we see success, no rows returned. And if we come over to the table editor here, we see we now have the user ID, which is null. Okay, so I'm going to delete this note and we can create another note with a user just to make sure we do not have any issues. Now it's been deleted. Let's quickly create another note. Do we have a user ID? And now if we add the note, we see it gets added. We refresh over here. I thought it was somewhere here for the refresh. Yeah, so here we refresh and now we see this, the user ID, you see automatically is being populated for us. Okay, so now we have that done. Want to enable row level security on this table over here. It's as straightforward as just clicking here and enabling this, or you can also make use of the SQL editor here. I'm going to delete this and add this. So enable row level security, you click on this, success, no rows returned. And now if we come back to the table editor, once this is done, we see we now have this protected. Okay, so now we're going to add policies, which you can also do by clicking here and writing out the policies. But I just want to make use of the SQL editor because it's actually faster for us. So we're going to create a policy and then we're going to give the policy a name. So users can view their own notes on note for select, which means for the select operation. And it's like, hey, what do I use? So we're saying using the auth.userid compared to the user ID. We have already seen that in the user table, how we got this user ID automatically without having to do any extra work. So we are like telling PostgreSQL engine, which Supabase uses, hey, the auth that you are managing internally compared to the user ID that we have on the table. On the table, the notes table for the select operation, make sure you check this all the time. So it's going to work like a guard whenever the select operation is going to add this check into it. So we're going to run this and then we have the policy. We're going to have another policy this time around. It's going to be for insert. The idea remains the same. So with check, this check over here, and then we run this, we see it gets added. We need the same for update. And actually we have an error over here. So what's the error? Syntax error at near auth. I'm not quite sure. Let me debug with the assistant. I'm going to get rid of this and send this over here so we can see the error. So failed to run query on this auth.uid. Did I miss parentheses somewhere? Let me see. Okay. So let it help us rewrite it. So looks like we are missing something somewhere. Okay, so I'm going to give it the correct syntax and let it help us rewrite the syntax correctly. I'm not able to fix it. So where do we get the virtual version? So this is the update. Okay, yeah, so it's a matter of parentheses. So authenticated, yeah. Okay, so AI has helped us over there. So create policy, users can insert their own notes on public notes for insert to authenticated with check. So this is the correct SQL. I'm going to run this and now we're going to see success, no rows returned. You can always verify all of these straight up from the table editor. Okay, so now we have this. We need two more. I think this is for insert. Yeah, so we need 4 updates. I'm going to run this again and let's see if this is successful again. Success, no rows returned. And the last one we're going to have is for delete. So I'm going to get rid of this and add for delete and save this. Now you're going to see it's going to work. Now if we come over to the table editor here and we see we have 4 policies, you can inspect the different policies. And if you come here, you can see edit policy and you pretty much see, you know, everything here that we could have done by clicking through. Okay, so now we have the policy on this table. We do not need to really make much change on our application. We just need to generate the types or regenerate the types. So if we check our package JSON, here we have the generate types and we run this command, it's going to update the Supabase, not here. Where do we have it in the source? We have the types and we have the notes, right? Nope, not here. Yes, the database types. So now we should maybe see policies here. So insert update relationship. If we can search for policy, now we do not see policy. Do we see RLS somewhere? No, we don't. Okay, so let's continue. The next step is for us to make an update to our notes type. So for notes inputs, we have the database on the public schema, the tables, the notes, insert, the title and the content. Actually, we do not need to make any change here. So this is going to be filled automatically. We do not need to, let's say, take the user ID, okay, from here. So no change is needed there. Let's also check the notes.ts file. If we need to make any change here. Nope, we do not need to make any change. We're not going to pass over the note. It's going to do that automatically. And what other one do we have? Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it, but we can confirm for creating a note, it's automatically going to check the currently logged in user. So let's try to create a note. We're going to come here and we say God works, does this work? And let's click on add notes, and now we see notes here. And if we come over here and give this a refresh somewhere here, we're gonna see the notes here. All right, so now we are sure it is working. The next step of our application is for us to work on our AI to be able to summarize the note and also help us to auto generate the tag with Gemini AI. All right, so we're gonna work on our AI summary, and we're also gonna work on auto tagging making use of Gemini AI. All right, so let's come over to the documentation. I already have it opened up here, aistudio.google.com. You want to make sure you're here. And once you're here, you want to locate the API keys section. So here where it says get API key, you want to click here. And we're going to create a new API key. And the name, you can give it any name of your choice. I'm going to go with the name of application, which is View Notes AI. So I'll go here with View Notes AI like this. And then you want to have it in a project. I'm just going to leave it with the default Gemini project that was created, and then I'll hit on create key. Now this is going to give us the key, which we are going to make use of in a moment. We are going to store this in an environment variable. So this is my API key. You want to make sure you have your own API key, because I'm going to be deleting this key or rotating this key once we are done. Yeah, so let's copy this key and let's come over to our application, and I'm going to close all these tabs that we have open, and in the env environment variable we can have the vit, or maybe this will be called on the server side, I'm not sure yet, but we can double check. But for now we'll just call it Gemini key. So if we call this on the server side, you don't want to expose this key on the client, so you do not want to attach the vit underscore prefix. So this is something we're going to be updating as we proceed, or maybe we just update it now and just go with Gemini key. Now we have this, we need to initialize Supabase project. We need to initialize Supabase here so that we can make use of the Supabase CLI to be able to run the create edge function. So I think we already have that. We already have the Supabase project, but if you do not, the command is npx like this, Supabase init, which is going to initialize Supabase right into the project. Now you see, we already have the Supabase folder here, and it's more or less like configured this config.toml file that we have here. We also have the git ignore. So our edge functions, our functions are going to be living right inside this Supabase project. And then we have already linked our project to Supabase. If for some reason you haven't linked it again, the command is npx Supabase link and the project ID. Okay, remember we have logged into Supabase, so we just need to take the project ID, which we are going to get from here. And here, if we come over to connect, this is your API key over here. Let's select the framework of Vue.js, and this is our API key, our project ID. So you want to copy that and use the value over here. Okay, so we wait for this to finish up, and once this finishes up, we are going to create the add function, which is going to help us, asks us to select the project, and this is the project over here. So this project over here, our Vue Notes project. So we're going to select this, which matches this key. Okay, so now we just give this a moment and it's done. It finished the Supabase link. So now we can proceed and we are going to create our edge function. So this edge function is going to be called for us. So we're going to see how we can trigger this edge function. We're going to say npx Supabase functions, and then we want to create a new function, and the name of the function, we can give it the name of summarize -notes like this, and let's send this. We're going to see the function generated here for us in a moment, which is going to make use of Bone. You can see we have the functions and Deno, and asks us if we want to generate VS Code settings for Deno. I would just say yes over here, and we're going to see the .vs Code extensions, and then we have this Deno land here, and it asks us to download the extension. So no worries, we can continue. The reason it tells us that is because we're going to have some linting errors inside these functions. You can see we have the summarize note function that we created here, and we have the .npm rec, we have the deno.json, and we have the index.ts file here. Okay, so now we have the function generated. This is the error I was telling you about we are going to face, but no worries, we can continue. Now I want us to make sure that we have cors, because edge functions do not get cors handled for you automatically, unlike making use of Supabase REST API. So we need to write the cors ourselves so that we can be able to reuse it. So right here in the functions, we are going to create a folder which we can call _shared like this, and in here we're going to have the cors.ts. Now in here, let's go on and export the constant. We're going to call it cors headers, so we can have this object with access control allow origin, which is going to be star for allow all. We're also going to have the access control allow headers, which is going to have the authorization, X client info, the API key, and also the content type. All right, so now we have this. We need to write the edge function. So I'm just going to save the cors file here, and over here in the index.ts, we are going to get rid of everything we have here. This is just the default, and how we can go on to trigger this making use of CURL. You can see we have the API key where we have the S publishable key over here and the data. So I'm just going to leave this over here, so we can this comment over here, and we can get rid of this boilerplate that we got automatically. So let's update the .env here. We're going to make use of Gemini API key rather than just make use of Gemini key. Okay, so we have this done now. Let's have our edge function. We're going to start by importing our cors headers, which is going to come from the shared folder that we just laid out over here. And then we're going to have interface to summarize request, which is going to be or take in the content, which is of type string, and then the response that we expect back, we are expecting this interface summarize response, which is going to take the summary of string, and we also need the tag list of type string. So this is what we expect to get back from the AI. Okay, so now let's have our Gemini API URL. So const Gemini API URL is going to be equals to this URL over here. I got it from making research from the internet. So we have the generative language.googleapis.com/v1beta/models, and then we have the Gemini Flash generative content model over here. Okay, so I'm just going to collapse this so that it's easier for us to see. So this is the Gemini API URL that's defined over here. Now we want to have the function, and we can have the deno.serve, which is going to be the async function that takes in the request of type request. And over here, we are going to have this comment, which is going to be us setting this cause pre-flight. It must be handled first before we go on to handle every other logic. So that's why we are going to say over here, if the request.method is equals to options, we want to return a new response over here. And this new response is going to have or say okay, and then we're going to have the headers, which is going to have the cors headers. Then we can have our try catch block, and in the try block we want to say const content is going to be of type summarize content, and we can await request.json. Then if for some reason we do not have any content, or the content.stream.length, if that is equals to 0, then we're going to return a new response, and this new response that we have here is going to be like json.stringify the error that's going to say content is required, because we need the content to be required, and we're trying to get the content from the request. Okay, so now we have this. We can also have the status of 400, and here the headers, we are going to spread out the course headers and also have the content type, which is application JSON. Now let's get the Gemini API key from our .env. We can get that by saying const the Gemini API key is going to be equals to deno.env.get, and remember the key is the Gemini API key. And if for some reason we do not have it there, we are going to throw this new error that's going to say Gemini API key is required. Now we make sure that we have been able to check that we are getting the actual content. This is time where we're going to make the request. So we get the Gemini response is going to be awaiting the fetch API call to Gemini API URL, and then we want to have the key, which is going to be the Gemini API key like this. The method is going to be equals to post, is a post request, and the headers we're going to have is going to take the content type key, and the value is going to be application JSON. Then let's also have the request body. The body over here, we're going to JSON.stringify here this object where we have the contents. The role is going to be user, and then the path is also going to be an array. So here we have role user, and after role user we have paths, which is going to be this list of object where we can have the text over here, which is going to be like the prompt. Hey, go on and summarize the following notes in 1 or 2 sentences and suggest 2 to 4 short topical tags. And then we have the note content here, which we're going to inject the content over here. So, and suggest 2 to 4 topical tags, note content, then we're going to inject the content here. Okay, so then we can close all of these up, and we want to have the generation config, so configuration for Gemini API. Here we're going to have the generation config, which is this object. For the request MIME type is going to be application.json. We're also going to have the response schema after this. The response schema is going to be an object where we can pass across the type. The type here is going to be object, and we can also have some properties like the summary. The summary is going to be of type where the value is going to be string, and then the tags here is also going to be of type array, and where we can also pass in the items. Okay, so we're trying to configure the generation config. So here the tag is going to be this items where the type is of string. Okay, and then we have the required, so we want the summary and also the tag, so we want to make sure that these are required. Now if for some reason we are not able to get, so Gemini response is not okay over here, so we're going to say const here if Gemini response.okay, if that is false, then we want to have the error body. The error body is going to be awaiting the Gemini response.text, and we can just log to the console.error, so we can know what went wrong, Gemini API error. Then we can have the Gemini.response.status, and then we can have the error body. And now we're going to surface rate limit distinctions that we might have, which the front end can show a friendly error message. So that's why we're going to have this here. So we can go on to say something like if the Gemini response.status is equals to 429, that's where we can get the rate limiting error. Then we want to return this new response to the front end so that we can display something helpful. We're going to say json.stringify, want to stringify the error over here, object, and say rate limiting reached, try again in a few moments. And then we're going to also have the status of 429 here. And then we're also going to have the headers and the content type. For the headers, we spread out the course headers, and the content type is application JSON. But if it's not okay, if none any of these, then we can go on to throw the new error. So we log into the console, we check first with 429, we return the response to the client. But if it's not, then we can go on to throw this new error over here that's going to say Gemini responded with the Gemini response.status. Okay, so now we have all of these. That means everything is okay. We can get the data, which we get from Gemini response.json. And now we have the data. We can also go on to get the raw text, which is Gemini data.candidate, the first list item here, .content, .paths, also the first list item, .text. And if we do not have the raw data, let's also throw the new error because Gemini returned no unstable content that we can't make use of. So we're going to throw the error. And then that means at this point in time, we have the response guarantee. So response schema is going to guarantee that this can go onto pass cleanly and we do not need any markdown or any prose in our application. So what we are going to do over here is then to have the passed data. So we can say const passed, which is of type summarize response. It's then going to be json.pass, the raw text. And then we can return the new response over to the client. So we return the new response, json.stringify the past data that we have up there. With the headers here, we always want to have the headers. So we spread out the course headers, and which is going to be, and also the content type, which is going to be application JSON. Now, this is pretty much everything over here. We're just going to catch the error, and the error over here, we log the error to the console, and then we're going to return L response over to the client. So the error we're going to return to the client is just going to have the json.stringify the error, and want to first check if the error is instance of error so that we can have the error.message. Otherwise, we are going to say unknown error, and then we can give it a status response of 500. And the headers, again, we are going to have the course headers and also the content type application JSON. All right, so now we have the summarize notes function, Supabase edge function laid out. We do not have this edge function yet deployed, let's say to Supabase. So this is locally on our machine, but definitely we can deploy, and we are going to deploy this over to our machine to Supabase. So I do not know why we have this error over here, but we can go on to save the content of this file. All right, so up next is for us to maybe just have a quick review. First, we have demo.serve. So this is going to be called whenever we call the summarize note function. We are first of all handling course over here. We did set up course here. And then we have our try catch block over here. And in the try block, we first of all want to do some validation, want to make sure we have the API key. Then we make the actual response to Gemini API URL, which is this URL over here. We are also attaching the header, the key to be Gemini API key. We configure the method, the headers, and the request body. We also configure the generation configuration, like in terms of properties, we expect summary to be of type string and also the tags to be an array, where each item in the array is going to be of type string. And then we are saying, hey, this is required. And then we are just saying, hey, if we do not have a successful request and we want to first check if it's a rate limiting issue, we return the response to the client so that the client can wait. But if it's not a rate limiting issue, we are going to throw the error. Then at this point, we are sure we have the data. We go on to get the Gemini data over here. We pass it to, we get the raw text. If we do not have raw text, that means the content is not stable for application. But if we do, we go on to json.pass the raw text over here, and we return the response back to the client with the passed JSON here. Okay, so I do not know why we have the error. I think it's because of this comment. I'm not quite sure. If I get rid of the comment, do we still have the error? Yeah, context is declared, but its value is never read. I'm not quite sure why we have the error, so I'll bring back the comments. I'll save this and I'll just refresh my window, and then we can test out we can go on to test out the edge function. Let's get things tested. Okay, so we need our env. We have it here. I'm going to copy this because we need to have it also here, right inside the functions folder. So right here in the functions, we need to also have the .env over here. And here we're going to paste this in here. Now you'll notice this env is also grayed out. So you want to make sure it is grayed out and you do not want to see any untracked or modify tag over here. And now we can serve the function locally. Okay, so we're going to try to serve the function. I'm going to just open up my terminal here. And over here in the terminal, we can say npx supabase, and then we can say functions serve and the name of the function. So the function is this summarize note function. So summarize -note function like this. And we also want to point it over to our env. So we say that -env dash file, and the env file is in the Supabase, as we see over here. And Supabase, we have the functions, and then we have the .env file over there. And there's this flag that we need to add, which is dash no dash verify, like this, dash jwt, which is going to make sure it's only needed here so that the CURL doesn't go on to send an authentication token. So Supabase doesn't reject us calling these functions, and we do not need to have extra configuration whenever we are testing this up. So you want to make sure you forward this, and let's give this a moment. We actually have an error. This should be Supabase function serve, not server. So I'm going to clear, and I'll replace this serve like this. Now you want to hit this, and we give this a moment. We can see Supabase start is not running. So let's run Supabase start, which you would need to have Docker installed on your machine. If you do not have Docker installed, you would not be able to proceed over here. So make sure you have Docker on your local machine. I'm just going to make sure my Docker is starting up. So you want to make sure you have this whale icon over here. Docker desktop is running. So once you're sure that Docker desktop is up and running, you can go on to run the Supabase start command, which could take some time the first time you run this command, as it's going to see over here is pulling all of these. Over here is doing the pulling, and then we're just going to give this some time for it to be done, and I'll see you once it is done. Okay, so now it is done. We have started Supabase locally. So this is your local development setup, the studio, the mail pit, the MCP, the APIs that you have, the project URL, the database that you have, the authentication keys. So this key is what we are trying to avoid by having the no verify. So we do not have need to add the key. We also have storage and all of these. Okay, so now we have this done. I'm just going to open up a new tab over here so that we can always have this for reference in case we need something here. I'm not just going to clear for now. Even though you run the command again, you still get the output. And now we are going to test things out. So in this terminal over here, we are going to, we need to run the start command. So this command first, the npx Supabase function serve, so that we can serve the summarized nodes and have this. So let's go on and send this. We give this a moment for it to serve. We see it setting up the edge function runtime. So let's give this a moment, and you see it's pulling from Supabase runtime, and let's wait for this to also complete. Yeah, so right now our function is live, as we can see over here, 7 functions on this URL. So we're going to be making a request over here to this URL over here. So you can see it's functions, v1, and summarized nodes. So over here in the next terminal here, we're going to send this CURL over there. So I'm going to bring this in. So we have this link over. So we have this request over here. We have the post request to this location, which matches this location that we have over here. And the summarize node function, the contents type header, application JSON, and this data over here, we have the contents, which pretty much says had a great call with the design team today. We agreed on the new onboarding flow and need to follow up with the engineering team by Friday to scope the work. So this is what we are going to be testing out today. And what response do we expect? We expect a response over here that's going to have the summary and also the tag over here as JSON. Okay, so now let's send this. If we have done everything correctly, our API key, we should see this result over here, and we get a 503 response which says error API. Gemini API responded with 503. So let's see why we have this error 503 error, because this is currently serving this function, and the messages model is currently experiencing high demand. Spikes in demand are currently usually temporary. Please try again later. So it's not really our code wrong at this point in time. We are just getting the error, which is because this model is currently experiencing high demand spikes. And that error is coming in from this over here. So from here, so here, Gemini API error, as we can see over here with the Gemini API error. Okay. So I did wait it out a few minutes, and I'm gonna try again. So I'm gonna clear, and hopefully this time around we get something successful. Yeah, so now it works. So you see the summary, the design team finalized the new onboarding flow, and we'll follow up with engineering by Friday over here. So this is the summary, and then we get the tags, which is the design, the onboarding, the engineering, and the project management tag. So this is working as expected. Now we are sure that this is working as expected. The next step for us is to set up our secret environment variable over in Supabase. So we come over to Supabase and we check the functions. So let's say our database, and over here in database functions, we do not see any functions yet because we haven't deployed the functions. So this should be functions. Okay, it's currently refreshing. So we are not going to see any functions here because we haven't deployed the function, but once we do, we're going to see the functions here, and we can also have the secrets over here. So let's do that next. Now we are sure that this is working as expected. The next step for us is to be able to set our secret over to Supabase, and then we want to go on and deploy this function because currently this function is just on our local machine. You can either create a function here by adding a new function and you can set things up, but we are going to deploy the function that we have locally so that we can test over to the live environment. So I'm going to clear over here. And let's have our env. So here we have the env functions, the Gemini API key. The way we can have this over in Supabase is by saying npx Supabase secrets. And then we can have the set, and I want to set the Gemini API key and also this value. So I'm going to copy this and use this over here and send this up. So we give this a moment, and this is going to be sent over to Supabase. As you can see, it finished setting Supabase secrets. We can always verify. Let's double check. Let's just give this a refresh. Maybe we see secrets somewhere. I'm not quite sure about the UI over here, but we do not see anything yet. Maybe we push the function and then we see the secret set. So let's push the function. We can deploy the function by saying npx Supabase functions, and then we can say deploy, and the name of the function is the summarize node function. So you want to make sure you do not have any typo here. So this function summarize hyphen nodes like this. So now we say npx Supabase function deploy functions deploy. I said no typo and I had the typo functions deploy. We deploy this function and then we're going to have it show up in Supabase. Okay, so once we have the function deployed, this account, your account doesn't have the necessary privilege. Now, if you have this error, no worries. Let's come back to Supabase, and over here in Supabase, we want to come over here. I'm just going to come over to the dashboard, and over here, we want to come over to the, I think that's the team, not the team. You want to come over to the organization settings. No, you want to come over to your profile. So yeah, so account settings, if we come over to account, and over here we have access token. We want to generate a new access token. I'm going to give this access token a name of Notes AI, and then I'm going to leave the expiry date to be maybe 7 days and generate the token. Okay, so now I have the token generated. I'm just going to copy this token. Yeah, so I'm just going to copy this token, and you see you'll not be able to see this token again. And once you have the token copied, you can come back to your application and we can say export, and then we can say Supabase underscore access underscore token like this, which is then going to be equals to this value. So let's send this, and now we have this done. Let's try to deploy again. We're going to say npx Supabase functions deploy. Let's deploy the summarize node function. Now, if this doesn't work, we are going to, okay, now it's working. Is bundling the function, is deploying the function, and now we have the function deployed over to this project, and we can inspect it over in the functions tab. So let's come back here, and if we come back to the projects, this project, and we come back to database and we come over to functions, we are going to see the function here. If you do not see it here, you can just give this a refresh and you should see the function here. Okay, so for some reason we still do not see the function even though it says it's here. So let's click on this link and open this link up, and let's see where we can find the functions. Okay, so here we have the function. So it's actually under edge functions, and this function over here was the wrong place I was looking. This is a RPC remote procedure called functions. So I was looking at the wrong place. You had to be inside edge functions, and then you see the functions, and you also see the secret that we set sometime over here. which is this Gemini API key secret that we set. All right, so I was looking at the wrong place. I had to be here in edge functions. Now we have this done. The next thing we need to do is to regenerate our type. So if we check our project over here and we check out the database, so if we come over to the source and we check the database types, and if we search for functions over here, we have these functions. We do not currently have any functions. So let's regenerate the type. We know that if we come over to our package.json over here, we have this gen type script. So let's go on and run this. Let's go on and run this gen type script over here, which is going to regenerate the type. And now we expect this type to include our function. So it is done. Let's double check our database function in our source database types, and let's search for functions. You can see now we have the functions populated. Before it was just showing like this, never. We have the function over here, and let's see if we can search specifically for our summarize node function. Now we do not see it here, but we have the function now over here, so we can see this section got updated. Okay, so now we have this done. We're gonna update the nodes. So in our types, not in our types, so we're going to come over to our library, and in our library we want to come over to nodes, and over here we're going to have two functions which is going to help us to be able to summarize the nodes. Okay, so we're going to have over here a function, and the idea is this function is going to help us to summarize the nodes and also run the updates whenever we trigger this function, because now we have this function living over in Supabase. We want to be able to call this function, and this function is going to do what it was doing for us locally, which is updating our nodes. So we're going to export the async function. We can call summarize nodes. It's going to take in the actual node and it's going to return a promise that resolves to the nodes. And we can have the data, which is the AI result, and also the error. And we can await the supabase.functions, and I want to invoke this function over here. We expect to get the summary and the tag, which is the string array. So we are calling the summarize node function, and here we have the body, which is going to be the nodes. So remember, that's what this function needs. Now if we do have an error over here, we want to throw the error, and if we do not have an AI result, we also want to throw this error over here, no response here. So if everything is okay, we can go on to have our const data error, want to run an update on the nodes, and want to update the summary, which is going to be the AI result, the summary, and also the tag is going to be AI result, the tag. We want to select, and then we want to also have dot single here, and if error, we want to throw error, otherwise we're going to return data. So if we had an error while we are trying to run the update, we are going to throw the error, otherwise we can go on to return the data. So over here, we want to come over to the components and we want to make a change that's going to be right inside the notepad component. Okay, so over here in the notepad, we have the edit and we also have the delete, which are these buttons over here. So we have edit and delete. So we want to add an extra button here, which is going to help us to summarize. But before that, we also need to make sure we have the notes defined here. We also want to add is summarizing so that we can disable the button. Summarizing like this is going to be an optional boolean like this. And here summarizing, yeah. So here we're going to also emit summarize, and summarize is going to take in the notes. The note is going to be of type notes. So when we call the button, we are going to emit summarize here, and remember this over here needs to take in the notes. So let's do that. Let's add the third one here. Let's add this third button here. This button is going to, at click, is going to emit summarize and pass in the notes, and it's going to be disabled if we are summarizing. Then we're also going to add the class name of the classes over here, and we are also going to have the text here that is going to say, like, if we are summarizing, we want to display the text of summarizing, otherwise we display this over here that says summarize, and we can close the button over here. So let's go on and save this. Now that we have this updated, let's say the npx, let's start up our development server. So npx, I think we come over to the package.json, and that is the dev. I've been running so many projects, so sometimes I mix things up, so I have to double check the package.json. And if we come over here and give this a refresh, we should see our summarize button. Now we do not see the summarize button over here. And why don't we see it? That's because over here, we should see the summarize button. Yeah, so here is it. All right, so we see our summarize button. Now we need to wire up the summarize functionalities in the notes view. So let's come over to the notes view page. So that's going to be in the view and here in the notes view. Now over here, maybe somewhere before the handle submit functionality, but inside the scripts here, we are going to have this say const summarize and notes ID. We are going to keep track of it with ref. It could be string or null. And by default, we assign null. And then we can also have the summarize mutation is going to be equal to use mutation. And we pass in the mutation function, which is going to be the summarize note. And then we're also going to have on mutate, we are going to have the function which takes in the note. And now this is going to call the summarize note ID and value, and it's going to set it to the note ID. Now on success over here, we are going to also have this function which is going to invalidate the query, so the notes query, so that it goes on to update our UI. So we want to update the query key of notes. And then on settled, we want to set it back to null. So this is when maybe a success or a failure state, we want to set the note ID.value to be equals to null. Now we have this, we do not have the summarize note function. Let's make sure we bring in the summarize note function, which is going to be imported here. And you can always double check. This is going to be taken in the notes and it's going to discuss with our function that we have deployed. It's going to discuss our function we have deployed over in Supabase. So here where we have the summarize note, we see we are going to call it automatically. It's going to take in the note. We do not need to just have the note. It's going to have the note. And then on success, we want to invalidate the notes query over here. So where do we have the fetch with the query key of notes? So this is going to run again and call the create note. Not this, sorry, not create note. This over here, I'm looking for the query key. Okay. So I can't find the query key, but it's just going to invalidate that query key as we do. And then on settled, it's going to set the summarizing note to null. So now we have the summarize mutation. We are going to pass this summarized mutation over to the note card. So on click, we want to call this summarize over here. So here, let's come over to the notes card. And just under the delete, we're going to have at summarize. And at summarize is going to call the, oops, not summarize mutation, is going to call the handle summarize like this. And now the handle summarize like this. Now rather than call the mutation directly, we're going to have it in this handle summarize, and this handle summarize is then going to call this function over here. So this over here, the summarize mutation. So somewhere here we can have the function. So let's have the function, and this function we call handle summarize, and handle summarize function is going to take in the notes, which is going to be of type notes. And then inside this function, we are going to call the summarize mutation, and then we want to call dot mutate, and we want to pass in the notes like this. So this, it needs the note, the summarized notes. So we're going to pass over the notes. Now we just need to go on and test this. So open up your terminal, make sure in your terminal you have your development environment running. You also want to make sure that you have your Supabase function still up and running. So this is the command npx Supabase functions serve, the name of the function, your env where it's located, and the no verify JWT. Okay, so let's give this another trial. I'm going to come back, and this is actually making a real request this time around over to Supabase function here. So if you click on this, you can see the function and how often it has been invoked. We haven't called this function yet. We're going to call it now, and we want to add a note. So I'm going to add a note of meeting. We discussed programming in JavaScript, TypeScript, and Vue.js. And Vue.js. Okay, so let's just meet this and let's go on to add the note. Now we're going to see the note over here. And once we click on summarize here, we'll give this a moment. This should go on and do the summary, call our AI. So hopefully it's successful. We do not show like, We are meant to see summarizing, so let's come over here. We do not get an error. And yeah, so I don't think this is up and running. We have the early termination has been triggered, so I'm just going to quit this, and then I'm going to save the function again just so that we are double sure. And I'm also going to get rid of this. We have our function deployed. Okay, so now this is up and running. Let's give this another trial. I'm just going to also give this a refresh. And if we are summarizing, we should see the text of summarizing. That's what we have in the notes card over here. So here we have the notes card. We have this if we are summarizing. We're going to show summarizing, otherwise we show summarize. And in the notes view over here, I think we are missing summarize. And here in the notes card, we emit summarize, and once summarize. And yeah, so we missed something, summarizing. We needed this prop is summarizing, which we are not currently passing over here. So what we can do, we can pass the prop. So I'm just going to move the prop over here. So here we're going to have the prop, which is this is summarizing prop, and the value here is going to be if we have a note ID. So here we have the summarizing note ID, and here we assign the note ID. So we're going to say, hey, if we have this note ID, if this is equal to the note.id that we are currently looking at, then we want to go on and summarize the notes. So I'm going to give this a save, and now we have this wired up. Just also refresh here, and I'm going to hit on summarize. So I'll hit on summarize. Now you see we get the text of summarizing. We give this a moment, and it is done. So we see the tags over here. It's generated these tags. And we do not display the summary yet, but if you come over here, you see the function, you give this a refresh, you can see this function was invoked over here, success. And if you come over here, we should see that this has been updated to have the content. We have the content over here, and we have the summary over here, and we have the tag over here. Cool. So this is working as expected. So let's make sure we have the summary. So maybe somewhere here, we're going to also make use of if, because the summary over here is going to be of type text, and it can also be null over here. So just after here below, before we have the, so we need to be in the note card, and over here in the note card, just before we have the tag over here. So before we have this, just after the content, we are going to have this if with this paragraph tag. If we have a note.summary, we're also going to give it these class names over here: text sm, text indigo 700. We're going to give it a bg indigo 50, a rounded md, a px3, and a py2, a margin top of 1. And here we're going to display the note summary like this. So that's all the change we needed to make here. And once we give this a save and we come over here, come over to application, we should see now we have the discussion covered programming using JavaScript, TypeScript, and Vue.js. Now we're going to work on the next section where you'll be able to chat with your notes, making use of RAG, and with Gemini. So we're going to also enable pgvector so that we can generate embeddings, making use of Gemini embedding, and we're going to build a real chat interface that answers questions using only the logged in users' notes. So we have this functionality where we can click on summarize, and we're able to generate a summary based on the content for that specific note. We also have the edge functions that have been set up. Now we are going to enable pgvector, and we're also going to add an embedding columns right inside our notes table. And the idea is whenever we're going to have two new edge functions in this episode. So they're going to be doing different things. One is going to be embed notes, which is more or less going to be a fire and forget, and it's going to run every time whenever a new note is saved in our database, and it's just going to turn those texts, which is the content, into numbers. And then we're also going to have chat notes, which is what the user is actually going to be waiting on, and it's going to embed the question, searches, and stream and answer back in real time. So we're going to have this chat functionality. Now we need to enable pgvector, and then we need to add the embedding column. Let's enable that over here. So we can come over to our database, and in the database you want to look for the extensions, and over here in extensions you should search for vector, and you can enable vector here, or you can make use of the SQL editor, and in SQL editor you can also have the SQL. So I'm just going to get rid of this. And you want to create extension if not exist vector extension. So I'm going to run this, and it's going to run, and you're going to see success, no rows returned. And if you come back to your database, and if you come back to extensions and you search for vector, you're going to see it's now enabled. Okay, so now that we have this enabled, we need to add the embedding column over to the notes table. So let's come back to the SQL editor, and here in the SQL editor, I'm going to replace this with this. We're going to alter the table notes, and we want to add column embedding vector 768. Now, what is this 768 over here? We are using 768 dimensions, and it's not the model's default of 3072. Gemini embedding model is going to use this micro-shack representation learning, and its embeddings are also trained so that the shorter prefix is still meaningful, and it's going to work on its own. So we're going to truncate it to 768, which is going to cost a small fraction of a percent in terms of retrieval quality, and it's going to give us as much give us a smaller and also faster index for the notes application that we are building. And yeah, so we're going to make use of that trade, and yeah, because of that, we are going to just truncate it to 768. Now we have this. I think we have run this, I'm not quite sure, so I'm going to run this again, and it failed over here. Syntax error near at or near 768 over here. So again, I'm going to debug this with the assistant just as we did previously, and I'm going to send this over here. So it's going to fix the error over here, and give this a moment, and I'm going to see what did it give us. The unbalanced parentheses. It's always the parentheses issue. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to say fix this for me, fix this SQL here, and I'm going to send this. Now it's going to give us the updated SQL, and I'm sure it's just a parenthesis something over here. So this should be the updated SQL. We already have the create extension if not exist, alter table notes, add column this. So it doesn't look like it made any change. So I'm just going to copy this and paste this in here. We already have this, so this is just like duplicate, but we alter table notes and we have this. So let's run this again, and it's still gonna give us the error, does it? It works this time. So I'm not quite sure what we missed from previous, but now we do have it. And if we come over to our table editor and we check our notes, we are gonna have the embedding, the vector embedding, which you can see is null from here. Okay, so now we are going to also add a vector index, which is going to be used for fast searching. So let's all come back to the SQL editor, and then we're going to have this HNSW embedding, the vector cosine ops over here. And what this means here is going to have the recommendation index type for most projects. This HNSW is the recommended index type that you can use for most projects under a few million rows, and it's actually slower to build, but it's consistently faster, and it's actually going to be more accurate to query than the alternative, which is IVFF flat or IVF flat for just a personal note application like this that we are building over here. And you would never notice, any errors, or you would never notice any issues like this on during build time. So let's run this again, and we should see success, no rows returned. So we see success, no rows returned. So we're going to be creating this index on the notes. Okay, so now we have this done. The next step for application is to regenerate the types. We always want to regenerate the types whenever we make changes in our database, so that our database types here is going to be up to date. I'm going to close all these tabs that we do have open, and I'm going to come back to the package JSON, and here in the package JSON, I'm going to click on this gen types, which is going to regenerate our database types over here. So click on this, it's going to regenerate the types, and now we are going to have a match notes search functionality. That is what we are going to be working on next. So now this is done, we're going to close this, and next we're going to work on the match notes search functionality. All right, so now let's create this search functionality, which is going to be like a similarity search function that is going to make use of the query embedding vector, also the match count and the match threshold. So let's come back to the SQL editor here. I'm going to get rid of this, and we're going to create or replace function, a match notes function. It's going to have the query embeddings of vector 768. We also have the match count, which is an integer. We're going to default to 5. And the match threshold is going to float. So these are the different parameters that we're going to pass whenever we call this match nodes function. We want to make sure that we pass all of these. And then we're going to say, hey, this is going to be returning table here like this. I'm just going to collapse this here so that we can have more real estate to work with, and zoom out just a little bit. And then we're going to say this is going to return the table with the ID, the table, the consent, and also the similarity. And we also want to have the language SQL here, just like this down below here, which is the language SQL table. And then we're going to have the beginning and also the end. So we're going to mark it with this as $$ here, and also the end is also going to have the $sign that we have over here. So we're going to select the nodes, the node title, the node content, and we have 1 minus the nodes embedding. No worries, I'm going to explain this that we have over here, which is actually PG or Postgres pgvector cosine distance operator. And then we have the query embeddings as similarity, and from nodes we have the nodes.user_id that matches the specific user, and nodes.embedding is not null, and we have this comparison that we have over here to make sure it's greater than the match threshold. We also want to order by this. I want to limit based on the match count that we are receiving from here. Okay, so now this operator that we have over here is a pgvector cosine distance operator, which is smaller means more similar. So the smaller it means more similar, and we're going to compare over here 1 minus the distance. So we're saying, or we're trying to compare 1 minus distance to get the similarity score, where bigger means they are very much more similar, which is more intuitive to reason about, and where the nodes.user_id. So here we have where the nodes.user_id matches this user ID. This is what's going to keep this rag search that we have over here scoped to the specific logged in user, and the arrayless policy that we have already created protect this so that is scoped across the table access. But now we are going to also have a security invoker, a style function like this, which is the default. So it still needs that explicit filter so that it can stay consistent within the same primary filter. That's why we have over here. And here we have the match threshold that we have over here. So this match threshold is going to help us to quietly filter out nodes that aren't actually relevant. And without having this, the function would always go on to return the match count that is closest to nodes, even if none of them are actually a good match. So this can lead to Gemini being more or less like handed irrelevant content. We want to try to prevent that. That's why we have the match node over here. Now we're going to go on and run this, and if we've done everything correctly, we should see success no rows returned over here, and this is what we do. Now if you come over here to database, and if you come over to functions here, you can just search for match nodes, and over here match nodes we can see the function that we laid out, and we can also see the definition. We can see the arguments that this function is going to take. This is the name of the function, and this is going to be on the public schema. So we're not going to make any changes to the function. Now we're going to have the embedding edge function, and this function is going to help us to take a note, and then it's going to return its embedding function. So we're going to call it from the front end every time a note is created or updated and the Supabase write has succeeded. So whenever we create a note in the front end, we are going to call the embed note function, which is going to help us to run updates in our database. So let's work on this next. We're going to say npx Supabase, and then we'll call functions, and the new function is going to be embed-note like this. So let's send out this function, which is then going to create the new function. We are going to have the function right here in Supabase functions. We have the embed note function, and this is the index.ts file. Now, as always, I'm just going to get rid of this boilerplate code that we have over here so that we can replace the content. And once we're done, we're going to go on and deploy this function so that we can have it over on Supabase. Okay, so let's go on and have the content of this function. We're going to start by importing our course headers, which will come from our shared course file. And then we want to have the interface for the embed request. So we have the interface embed request, which is going to take in the text, and the text is going to be of type string. And then we are also going to have the interface for embed response. So the response we're going to get is the embedding, which is going to be a list of number Okay, so now let's have our Gemini embed URL. So this is the URL we're going to call, and it's this generative language URL that we have over here, .googleapis.com, and that is /v1 beta. And we have the model, which is the Gemini embedding 001, the embedding content like this. Okay, so let me quickly format this before we continue over here like this. So now we want to get the environment variable that we want to go and save the function. So let's call deno.save. It's going to take the function where we have the request of type request. And then we want to first check the method again. If it's equals to options, then we're going to be returning a new response back to the client. And this is going to say okay. And then the headers we're going to have here is the course headers. Now let's have our try catch block, and in the try block we want to get the text, which is going to be of type the embed request, and we can get it from the request by awaiting request.json. And then we can say, hey, if we do not get the text or the text.stream.length, so if we remove the leading and the trailing white spaces and it's equals to 0, then we're going to return a response. This is more or less like doing the validation over here. And the response is going to be this json.stringify the error response, text is required. And the status is going to be a status of 400, which means a bad request. And the headers here, we're going to spread out the course headers, and the content type is going to be equals to application JSON. Now let's get the API key from the environment variable. We can get that by saying const the Gemini API key is going to be equals to deno.env.get the Gemini API key. If we are not able to get the key, we are going to throw this new error that the Gemini API key is not set. Okay, so now we have this. The next step is for us to go on and get the response. Okay, so here we are going to say const the Gemini response, and then we want to make use of the fetch API. And then we can await the fetch and want to call the Gemini embed URL. And then the key is going to be our Gemini API key. Now the method we are also going to set to be a post request. And for the headers, we are going to have the content type to be application JSON. And the body over here is going to be the json.stringify. This object where we have the model. The model is going to be the model's Gemini embedding 001 model. And then we have the content, which is going to be split into the parts. So we're going to have content, which is going to be parts, list object like this with the text. And then I'm going to just drop this content over here because we're going to have the text type to be a retrieval document. And this retrieval document is the embedding that's going to represent this stored note over here. And it's actually not the shared query. So Gemini is going to go on and run an optimization on this text type that we have over here. Okay, so I just leave the comments so when you have access to it, you would also be able to, understand what's going on. That's why we have the text type to be the retrieval document. We also want to have the output dimensionality, and we're going to give it the 768, which we have also set up in Supabase. Now, if for some reason this is not successful, so if no Gemini response.ok, we are going to say the const error body so that we can display the error. We're going to say await Gemini response.text, and then we can console.error. And we're going to have this error that Gemini embed error, which is going to have the Gemini status and also the error. We're going to have the error body over here. And then we are also going to throw the new error, which is going to say Gemini responded with, and then we want to have the status, so the Gemini response.status. Now, if everything is good over here, the next thing we're going to check is the data. So Gemini data is going to be equal to await Gemini response.json. And then let's get the value. So const the values is going to be of type number list or undefined. And then this is going to be gotten from the Gemini data.embedding.values. And if we, for some reason, we do not get the values, then we are going to throw the new error that Gemini returned no embedding values. Now, if after the, if we are sure at this point in time that we are getting a response, let's have the result. So const result is then going to be equal to the of type embed result is going to be equal to this object. So we have the embedding to be these values. Now we can go on to return the response back to the client. First, we're going to JSON stringify the results over here. And we want to set the appropriate headers, such as the course headers, and also the content type to be equals to application JSON. Now the last thing we're going to do over here is to just have our catch block for error here. And this error we're going to have over here is going to first just log the error to the console before we can then go on and return a new response over to the client. So we return a new response where we just json.stringify this object where we have the error key, and we also always check if it's an instance of an error object, the error class. Then we're going to return the error.message. Otherwise, we're just going to say unknown error like this. And we have the status of 500, which means internal server error, and the headers to be of this object. Okay, so now we have the headers to be of this object. So now we're going to close this up like this, and want to make sure we deploy the function. Okay, so I'm gonna save this, and just something that you should know that currently we have this tagged type over here, which is retrieval-augmented, and now we're going to have the next, which is going to be the retrieval query, so that when we embed with the user's question, currently we haven't embedded the user question over here. Now they are not actually the same settings twice, and Gemini actually is going to go on and optimize the vector differently depending on which side of search that we are currently embedding. And if we go on to mismatch them, it doesn't actually break anything outright, but retrieval quality is going to get notably worse. So I want to also just have that in mind when we are implementing the search functionality. Okay, the retrieval query. So now let's go on and deploy this function. So I'm going to open this up, and we know the command is npx supabase like this, supabase functions deploy, and then we're going to have the embed -notes like this. Now this function is going to get deployed, and functions, I keep missing that. So npx supabase functions deploy embed notes over there. Okay, so we do not need to set the environment variable here as well, because this environment variable over here, now this fails for some reason. So I don't know why it keeps failing like this. So what's going to happen is I'm just going to come over here, and I'm going to come over to the profile, and I'm going to come over to the account, and I'm going to come over to the access tokens. I'm going to generate a new access token, and I would set this to 7 days, and I'll give this a name of RAG AI view, something like this, and I'm going to generate this token. Now, once you have the token generated, if it fails for you like it's doing for me, you can go on to copy this token, and we are going to be making use of it here. And then we're going to say, export Supabase, and then we're going to say, not like this, we're going to say export Supabase. So Supabase, and then we want to say underscore access underscore token. And this access token is then going to be equals to this. So we want to paste this in here. And now let's give this another try out. npx supabase functions deploy embed note. I don't know why it happens like this all the time. And now it's building the function. And once the function is done building, it deploys the function. You also see the size of the function over here. Okay, so now we can inspect the deployment here. And if we come over here to the function, we can come over to our edge functions, and we should see the function over here. So this few seconds ago, we deployed this. Now we're going to wire up the embedding to make use of the function into the note save. So where we have our lib for notes, I'm going to clear this, and where we have our lib, let me also collapse this, and we come over to our lib, and over in the notes, we are going to have the generate embedding function. So maybe I'm going to add this over here just after the summarize note. We're going to add this new function, which we're going to call generate embedding, or generate embedding. It's going to take in the text, and the text here is going to be of type string, and it's going to return a promise that resolves to a string. Okay, so we're going to say const data error is going to be equals to await Supabase functions, and then want to invoke this function, which is going to return the embedding, which is of type number list. Now over here, we're going to pass in the name of the function, the embedding note, and then we pass in the body, which is this text over here. Now, if we have an error, we are going to throw the error, but if we do not have data, we want to throw a new error as well, which is going to say no response from embed note. Now we're going to return this embedding like this. So it's going to be the list here with the data embedding. We want to join it with this comma over here. Now, the reason why I didn't like this is because pgvector, the reason why we do like this is because pgvector accepts vectors over Postgres as a string. So just as we are trying to map over here. So maybe something like this. We can have something like this over here, which is like 0 or 1 or 2, 0 0.1, 0 0.2, something like that. Okay, so that's why we are trying to format this over here like this. So we can go on and save this. Now that we have this saved like this, the next step is for us to make sure we are calling this function, the generate function body over here where we have the create node. So now before we return data, this is where we are going to go on and run the embedding over here. So we're just going to call the generate embedding function, which is this function over here. So it sees an async function, but this is going to be a fire and forget, which means we are not going to delay the node creation until we get a response. So here we're going to start by having generate embedding, which is then going to take in the data.title, and we're also going to pass the data.content. Otherwise, we're going to have an empty string. And then as a response, we get the embedding. And then we're going to call the Supabase, and we save from nodes. We want to run an update over there. Want to update the embedding, which is going to equals to the embedding that we get as a response, and it equals the id equals data.id. And in case of any error, we are going to go on to log the error to the console. Now we're also going to be doing this on every edit as well. So I'm going to save this whenever, for some reason I don't know why I do not have formatting. So maybe I just say configure and select prettier over here. And now I have formatting. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to save this, and now we have the generate embedding done. Whenever we create a node, we also just going to copy this, and we're going to do the same here for the update. So it's pretty much the same over here, and I'm just going to drop this here, and we can save the file. Okay, so now we have it. Whenever we create a node, we also go on to run an update so that we do not have stale embedding. So we want to make sure we update the chat so that it can increase or decrease the wrong answers that we have over time. And now the next step for us is for us to have our streaming chat edge function, which is the function that actually does the actual RAG work, which is going to embed the question, search for matching nodes, and also help us to stream the Gemini answers back to the browser as it gets generated. Now we're going to be creating the streaming chat edge function. This function is going to actually, as I said earlier, help us do the actual RAG work, which is going to embed the question, go on and search for matching nodes, and then stream Gemini answer back to the browser as it gets generated. I'm going to open up the terminal, and I will clear the terminal, and we can run the command npx supabase functions new. And the name of this function is going to be the chat nodes function. And if we come over here, so we see Supabase and we see functions, we are going to see the chat nodes function here. Now we can come into the index.ts, and over here in the index.ts, we can delete everything that we have here. And then we can start from scratch. So let's import the create client. This is going to come in from esm sh at supabase js at 2. So this is the Supabase client we use. We're also going to import our course headers, which will come from our shared course. And then we're going to have the interface for the chat request, which is going to take the question of type string. Now we're going to have the Gemini embed URL. So let me just collapse this before we continue. We're going to have the Gemini embed URL. And this URL is going to be, this is Gemini embed URL. So generative language, Google APIs, and we have the /v1 beta, and the model we are making use of is the Gemini embed content, or one embed content like this. And then we also have the constant for the Gemini stream URL. So this is the streaming URL, generative language of Google APIs.com /v1 beta /models, and we are going to make use of Gemini 2.5 stream generative content, and the auth is going to be SSE. Then we have our edge function deno.serve, which takes in the actual request of type request. We do our check if the method is equals to option so that we can return a new response. This new response of OK and the headers course headers, and we are going to have our try catch block. So the first thing we're going to do is to try to get a question from the request, the actual question, which is going to be of type chat request. So we're going to await request.json, and we're going to check or try to validate the question to make sure it's not an empty string. So if there's no question, or if we trim the question and the length is equals to 0, this means this is an empty question, and we can return this new response to the client where we json.stringify. And we're going to have the error over here which says question is required, and then we're going to also have the status of bad request 400 and also have the headers sent to the client. We're also going to try to retrieve the API key from the .env. So this is the same API key. We're not going to have any changes here. So we're going to say const the Gemini API key is going to be equal to deno.env.get the Gemini API key. Let's also run the validation here in case we're not able to get the API key. Then we're going to throw this new error. Now we're going to have the function over here which is going to run by calling the array-less scoped function. So we want to have the auth header so that we can always forward the authorization header to match the auth UID. So we're going to get the authorization headers, and if we do not get an auth header, then we need to return this response over here that we are missing the authorization header. Okay, because we need to forward this so that it can correctly resolve into the match nodes function. We need to make sure we are forwarding the right headers. So here we're also going to have the status of 401 unauthorized, and the headers here is going to be the course headers of content type application JSON. Okay, so now at this point we are sure that the user that's calling this is authorized, is authenticated. Next we're going to have Supabase, so we can have the create client, and we want to get the Supabase URL and also the anon key. No worries, we're going to be getting this from the Supabase dashboard in a moment. I also want to add this in our environment variable. So the Supabase anon key, and then we want to set global headers by having global, and then we have headers for the authorization, which is then going to be the auth headers here. Now we're going to go on to embed the question with the retrieval query, not the retrieval document here. So I'm going to drop this comment over here. So we have like 5 steps that we need to go through. So this is the first step we are doing, so we can get the embed response, and the embed response is going to be equals to await fetching from the Gemini embed URL, where the key is going to be equals to Gemini API key. We're also going to configure the method. The method is going to be post. We're also going to have the headers, which is this content type header application JSON, and then the actual body over here. So for the body, we're going to have the json.stringify where we pass the model. The model is going to be the models/Gemini embed 001. We are also going to have the content, which is going to have these parts over here, the text question, and then we're going to have the tags type. The tags type over here is going to be retrieval query, and the output dimensionality is going to be 768. Now, if for some reason we do not get a good response over here, so we say if no response, embed response.ok, let's throw an error that the embedding the question failed here. Now we want to get the embed data. And how do we get the embed data? We are going to await the embed response.json. Okay, so we're going to say over here const embed data is going to be equal to await the embed response.json. Now let's also have the query embedding, which is going to be of type number list, and this is going to be the embed data.embedding.values, so we get from here, and we want to search for a matching note via the note match progress function that we have created. So remember the RPC remote procedural call function that we created in Supabase. We are going to use it here. So we're going to get data, which are the matches, or error, which is the match error, and we're going to await our supabase.rpc.match nodes, and then we're going to pass in the query embedding, which is going to be the embedding this over here where we have the query embedding dot join. We want to join by a comma, And then we have the match count, which is going to be equals to 5. And then we have the match threshold, which is also going to be 0.5. Now, I just want to show us real quick over here. If we come over here to the browser and we see the functions. So this is the function, the embed not edge functions. If we come over to database and we come over to functions over here. So here, if we search for match notes, which is the name of function that we are using, you can see over here it needs this argument. So the query embedding, the match count, and the match threshold. And then it's got, this is the definition of the language over here. So that's why over here we're passing the query embedding, the match count, and also the match threshold. So now that we have that, we're going to say, hey, if we do not find, or if we have a match error, then we can go on to throw this error over here. And the next step is for us to build a context for the nodes that actually matched. So it could also be a 0 over here. So for the context, we're going to say const. Context is going to be equal to the matches. So if we have matches, if that is true, and the matches length, because it's a list, if that is greater than 0, then we want to have the matches. So we can map through the match where we have the notes for the title of string and also the content of string. And then we're going to return the title with the notes.title and then the notes.content. This is just going to be the end here, just for line breaking. And then we also want to join this with /n, where we have the --n like this, to have the -- there. Then we are going to have the prompt. So the context, we're going to say, if we have context, we're going to say you're answering questions using only the user's own notes below. And if the notes don't contain the answer, say so honestly instead of guessing. Okay, so now we're going to pass across the notes and also the context over to it with a question. So we're going to say so honestly instead of guessing, and then we want to pass in the notes just like this with the content. No worries, I'm going to format this real quick once we are done typing, and also the question. All right, so now we're also going to say otherwise. So if we do not have a context, so we say this user has no note for this match, match this question, tell them you couldn't find anything in their notes and don't make up any answer. And then we're going to attach the question. Okay. And don't make up any answer, and we want to attach the question there. All right, so now once we have that, the next step is for us to go on and stream. We want to stream the answer back from Gemini. So we're going to say the Gemini response is going to be equals to await fetch. We want to pass the Gemini stream URL that we defined right up. And we also want to add as a key the Gemini API key. Then we're going to configure like the method. The method is going to be equals to post. We are also going to configure the headers where we have the content type to be equals to application JSON. And then we're going to have the body. The body here is going to be json.stringify. And we're going to have the content where we pass in the role. The role is going to be user, and the path is going to be the text prompt like this. Now we do some validation. If for some reason Gemini response is not okay, or we do not have a body over here returned, then we can go on to return a throw new error back to the client that Gemini streaming request failed, and we can have the Gemini response.status. Then the last step here, we want to go on and restream Gemini SSE chunks so that we can send it back to the browser as plain text deltas. So the front end is not going to know anything about this Gemini SSE format here, so it's just going to read a stream of text. That's what we're trying to do over here. So we're going to say reader is going to be the Gemini response.body, and we can call get reader. You can have some logs over here to see how it works. And then we also want to have the decoder, which is this new text decoder. And we're going to have the encoder, which is the new text encoder. And then we can stream. So const stream is going to be new readable stream. And we can have the start function here, which we then have access to the controller. And we can say let buffer, and the buffer is going to be an empty string. So while true, we're going to say have the reader.read. So we're going to say const done, and the value is going to come from this reader that we have over here by awaiting reader.read. And if it's not done, we want to have if done, we want to break, which is going to stop the loop. Now we're going to say buffer plus equals to this buffer that is an empty string wants to be to the decoder.decode value stream true, and then we also want to have the lines. So const lines is going to be the buffer.split by a new line break over here. Now the buffer is going to then become equals to the lines.pop, otherwise it's going to be an empty string. Now let's loop through the lines. So we'll say for const line of lines, and then we want to check if the line starts with data. We want to then continue. You can make logs. I have logs, done the logs. That's why I'm sure about all of these. So I've done the logs and I've done debugging. And then we also want to say const the JSON string is going to be the line.slice6, and we want to have .stream. And if we don't have any JSON string, let's go on and continue. Now finally, we're going to have the try catch block over here where we can go on to pass the string. So we're going to say try passed is going to be equals to the JSON.pass, where we pass the JSON string, and we also want to have the text chunk. So the text chunk is going to be equal to pass.candidate, the first argument, .content, and want to have .paths, and the first one .text. And if text chunk, then we want to go on and call the controller.enqueue, where we can have the encoder.encode the text chunk like this. Okay, so now in case something goes wrong, we are going to have maybe incomplete data chunk midstream. We want to go on and skip that to the next chunk until it completes over here. So I'm just going to drop this comment so that you understand what's going on if we do have an error. So then we have the controller, and the controller that we have over here, we want to go on and close this controller. So just right here inside the stat, we are going to go on and call controller.close. Okay, so let's return a new response back to the client. Once we've closed the controller, we are going to return a new response, which is going to be the stream. And then we can also configure the objects like the headers. We can spread out the course headers, and the content type, we are going to have text plain, and also the character set to be UTF of 8 like this. Okay, so now let's have the catch. Let's catch error. And then we can have console.error, the chat notes error, and the error like this. And then let's return a new response, which is then going to be json.stringify, where we're going to return the error. We check if it's an instance of error. We're going to return the error message. Otherwise, we are just going to say unknown error. And we also have the status here, status of 500. And we also want to have the course headers, which is going to be content type application JSON. Okay, all right. So this is the function that we have over here. And this function over here is going to, as we have seen, it's going on to do 5 different things. So it does 5 different things. The first thing it does over here, we see the actual embeddings. What it does over here, it embeds the question. And once it's done embedding the question, you see over here the next thing is search. So after embedding the question, it goes on to search Supabase for the matching nodes, making use of this match nodes RPC function that we have over here, that we have defined. And once it is done, it goes on to build a prompt. So here we have the build context from whatever match. So it's going on to build the context, and from the context, we go on to build a prompt. And after building a prompt here, we try to make it to be honest about questions that do not have any answers, so that we are not making AI to hallucinate. So then we're going to call Gemini streaming. So Gemini SSE streaming endpoint. We then transformed our that SSE stream into plain text chunks on the way out. So that's what this is going to be doing here. So now we're going to have the plain text chunks. The last step is what matters, because the front end needs to go on to be able to pass the Gemini data format at all. And the last step that we have over here, so this step 5, is what really also matters, because the front end doesn't need to start passing Gemini response format at all. It's just going to read the text as it arrives, which is going to keep the hook that we are going to create, or the composable we are going to create, to be actually lean. So that's why we are doing all of these passing over here. So now we can go on and save this file, and now we have made changes to this file. Let's go on and deploy this function. So we're going to say npx Supabase functions deploy, and hopefully this time around we do not have any errors. Npx Supabase functions deploy. the chat notes function. So we give this a moment, it's going to go on and build our function. And if we come over to the edge function, we are going to see that we have a new function over here, edge functions. We now have this, which was created a few seconds ago. So this. Okay, so now we have the chat notes function done. Now we're going to work on the front end. I'm going to close what we have here, and then I'm going to come right here into the source, and in the source where we have the types, and in the types, we are going to have a new type for our chat.ts. Here we're going to export the interface, so export interface, and this interface is going to be called chat message. And this chat message is going to message like this. This chat message is going to have the ID. The ID is of type string. We're also going to have the role, and the role here is going to be user or assistant. So it has to be a string, user or assistant, like this. And then we are also going to have the content, and the content is going to be of type string. Now, this is the chat message. We're going to make use of this message by building out the composable. And this composable is going to be the usechat.ts file. So here, use chat like this .ts file. Now here we're going to start by importing ref. Ref is going to come from view. We also need to make sure we bring in Supabase from the lib/Supabase. And then we're going to bring in our chat type message, our type chat message, which will come from the types chat. So let's have the function. We're going to be exporting this function, which we'll call use chat. Use chat is going to have a reference for the message. So messages is going to be the ref chat message list, and it's going to be an empty array by default. And if it's streaming, we're going to have ref, which is going to be false. And we're also going to have the error message, which is going to be ref and empty string. Now let's have the async function, which we'll call send message. We're going to take the question is going to be of type string. And then we say if question.stream, if there's no question.stream or no streaming value, that means it is false or null, we are going to return. Now, if error message.value is equals to empty string, we're going to assign error message here so that we can have the user message, which is of type chat message. The message will have the ID, so we use crypto.random UUID to generate an ID. The role is going to be user, and the content is going to be question. So this question here. Now we're going to have this constant where we have the assist message, which is going to be of type chat message. And here we're going to have the ID. So this is going to be the response, this ID here. The role is assistant. And then we're going to have the content. So let's have the messages value. We want to push into the messages here. So messages.value.push. We're going to push the user message and also the assistant message. Remember, we have different roles here. So we're then also going to say if streaming.value is equals to true. I just want to point out something real quick. Remember over here, we have the role user, because here we said the role could be user or assistant. The front end is going to need this. And for the assistant message, we have the content to be an empty string, but for the user message, we have the content to have the question. Now, this is in case we have any error over here, but the messages here we start up to be an empty array. And then we're going to push the user message, and we're also going to push the assistant message over to the messages. Okay, so the next thing we're going to have over here, we're going to resume this, is going to have the try catch block. And here we want to have the Supabase functions to invoke the buffers for the full response. So we say const data, which is of type session data. We first want to get the auth session because we need the authorization for the logged in user JWT. And then we get the access token equals to from the session data the session.access token. We also need our Supabase URL. So let's not forget to add the Supabase URL as well as the Supabase anon key. So we have the v Supabase URL, and the Supabase anon key is going to be equals to import meta.env.supabase anon key. Then we can have a request that we send over to Supabase URL. So const response is equals to await fetch, where we inject the Supabase URL, and then that function v1, and then the chat notes, our chat notes function. The method is going to be post, and the headers we're going to have here is the contents type header, application JSON. We're also going to have the authorization, which is going to have the bearer access token. And then we're going to have the API key. So this API key over here, which is the bearer access token. And then we also have the anon key for the API key. Sorry about that. Now we can close up this, and then the body is going to be JSON.stringify. We pass in the actual question. Okay, so then we can check, hey, if the response is not okay, or we do not have a response body. So if the response is not okay and no response body, we are going to throw this new error that is going to say the chat request failed, and we're going to have the response.status. Then let's have the reader. We want to get the reader from the body, response body.getReader. So we say response.body.getReader. And then we also get the decoder, which is going to be the new text decoder here. And why true, we're going to say have access to done and the value. So we can use reader.read. So done value is going to be await reader.read. And if done, we want to go on and break. That means it's done reading. But if not, we want to get the chunk. So const chunk is going to be the decoder.decode, where we have the value, and we want to set streaming to true. Now let's go on and find the assistant message by ID and then go on to append. So we say const target is going to be the message.values. We want to find where the message.id is going to be equal to the assistant message.id over here. And we can say, hey, if we do have a target, then we're going to go on and say the target.content is going to be plus equals to the chunk. And if for some reason this try block that we are currently in, if we have some error, the catch case, we are going to have the error message.value to be equals to the error that we have over there if it's an instance of an error. Otherwise, we're going to say something like something went wrong. And then finally, we want to go on and set is streaming to false. Is streaming.value to false, and we can then return the object, which is going to have the messages. It's also going to have is streaming. We're also going to have the error message, and then we have the send message, and we can close things up. All right, so remember over here, we are missing the Supabase URL. If we check our env, not the one of the functions over here. Actually, we have this Supabase URL, and we have the publishable key. Okay, so I think this should be the Supabase publishable key. So let's rename this. Let's come over to our env and take the publishable key, and we're going to replace this anon key that we have over here to this publishable key. And for the Supabase anon key, we're going to rename this to be publishable key, and we can save this. Now let's also double check our edge function that we have over here in Supabase functions. Let's start with the chat notes here to make sure we do not have the anon key over here, and we do. So we're going to update this. Rather than make use of Supabase anon key, we are going to replace this with Supabase publishable key. So I'll copy this key over here. And over here in the .env for the functions, we want to have the .env here. I'll paste this in here, and this is going to be the Supabase publishable key, so we can get rid of the vit setup here. And then I'll copy this so that we can then update the chat notes, the index, and here we have this Supabase anon key. We want to replace this with the publishable key. So remember, we are creating this client making use of the URL that we have over here. Now let's just double check. I just want to quickly do a real search here to make sure we do not have the anon key here, and we don't. And I'm also going to do the same for the summarize note, the index, and I'm also going to search for anon key over here, which we do not have here, and we can close this. All right, so now let's quickly go through the use chat composable that we have here. We have the send message function, which we have over here, and then we have the messages, is streaming, and this error. Now this send message here does some validation at the beginning, and then we compose the assistant message and also the user message, and we make sure we have the headers over here, the API key and the bearer access token. So we want to make sure we get it from the session, the currently logged in user session, and then we make a request to our own edge function, the chat notes function. So Over here, we are making a request to this function that we have over here. So this function, and this function needs the body, and in the body, we try to retrieve the question. So if you come over here, that's what we try to do. So demo.serve, we have the request, and we have the question that we try to retrieve from the request. And based on the question, we're going to use it to embed the question and have the RAG retrieval, not the retrieval document over here. So the tax type. Now let's come back here, and then we have the response check to make sure it's a valid response. And if the response here, we get the reader from the response. And why true? When we are not done reading, once we are done, we want to go on and break, which is going to break the loop. We are going to get the chunk and then the target over here. We have the target over here. We want to set the content over here. Okay, so the content is going to be equal to the chunk that we have over here. Okay, so now we have this. We just return the messages, streaming the message, error message, and also the send message function. Now, each view nodes or each node view that we have in our application is going to have their own function. So it's important that it's going to have their own message. So it's important that we have that in mind. It's not overall message for the application. It's going to be overall message for all of these that we have over here. And now we're going to work on having the chat panel. We're going to have the chat panel, which we are then going to have right inside the nodes view. So let's close all these tabs that we have open, and then we are going to come right into the chat panel. So this chat panel is going to be into the components, and here we're going to have the chat panel.view file. Now we're going to actually be fast with this, or more straightforward, because we pretty much understand everything that's going on here, and whatever is new we're going to explain. So we're going to import ref and also next tick and also watch, which will come from view, and then we need our chats, our use chat composable, which will come from composable/use chat. And then from use chat, let's make sure we are bringing in the message, streaming, error message, and our send message function. So all of these will come from use chat. Let's have reference for the input so that we can have the two-way binding. So input is going to be equals to empty string by default. And the scroll container, so that we can scroll to the new message, is going to be the HTML div element, or it could be null. And by default, we start null. So we're going to have the function handle send function, which is going to get the question from the input.value, and we can have .stream. And if we're not able to find any question, then we go on to return. And then we also want to check the input.value to be an empty string. Then we can await send message and pass in the question. Now we're going to auto scroll to the latest message as the stream comes in. So we are going to have the watch over here for the messages.value.map, where we map through each message, and then the content we want to join in by an empty string. And then we can await the next tick and say if the scroll container.value is true, then we're going to say the scroll container.value.scroll top. So if it's not null, it's going to be equal to the scroll container.value.scroll height. So that's what we have here, and then we can close up the script. Now we're going to have the template. The template here is going to have these classes. So for the div, BG white, rounded LG, shadow SM, give it a border grade 200, flex, and also we're going to give it a height of 500 pixels. And then we're going to have this div over here, which is just more or less like a heading, a BG grade of 200. And then we have the H2. The H2 over here is going to have the classes for the font, the text, grade 900. And we can say chat with your notes. And then we're going to have the paragraph tag here, which is going to have these classes. And also a subtitle, which is going to say answers are grounded in your notes only, like this. So now we have all of these. The next thing we're going to have is this paragraph here. And this paragraph here is going to have the ref, which is then going to be the scroll container. And then we're also going to have the class, which is going to have these classes over here. So then we can have this v-if, and this v-if is going to be the messages.length. If it's equals to 0, then we're going to display these classes over here. Then over here, we're going to display this text over here, which says something like ask something like, what did I write about, design meeting, just a sample question we could ask here. And then we're going to have the div over here, and this div is going to then loop through the messages. So here we're going to have v4, the message in messages. We have the key that we make use of over here. The key is going to be the message.id. Then we also have the dynamic class. So this is new. This is how we can have dynamic classes. So it's going to be a list. So we're going to have the classes, which are the base styles. These styles are always going to be applied, and then we're going to have another style that we can apply conditionally. So we say the message.row, if it's equals to user, then we are going to apply these styles over here, like the bg indigo 600, also give it the text white and the self end. And if it's not user, that means it is assistant, we're going to give it bg gray 100, text gray 800, and self stat. Now we can close this up here, and then we're going to have the actual message content. So here we're going to say the message.content. Otherwise it's streaming. We're just going to say ... This is when we are getting new message like this. That's when we get the placeholder here, and we can close the div. We're going to have this if maybe something goes wrong, error message. We're going to have this class. Remember, this error message is coming from our use chat composable. So then we're going to display the error message over here. Now, all that is left is for us to have the actual form to submit the question. So we have the prevent over here, submit.prevent, which calls handle send. And then we're going to pass the class to the form. And the form is going to have the input. So we have the V model for data binding, two-way data binding. So we have the input, the text, the type is going to be text. And the placeholder here is going to be ask your note a question. So something like this. And it's going to be disabled if it's streaming. So if we are currently streaming, it's going to be disabled, and all that is left for us to have the class to this specific input. So we're going to give it the border grade 300, rounded MD, px3, py2, text sm, focus outline none, focus ring 2. And we're just going to give it all these classes over here. Now, after having the input, the next thing we're going to have here is going to be the button, which is actually the send button. So here we're going to have the button. The button is going to be of type submit, and it's going to have this disabled if we are streaming, or if we trim the input. So if there's no input.trim like this, and then we're going to have the class name. So the class is going to be the bg indigo 600, give it the text white, give it the text sm, also a font medium, a px of 4, a py of 2. We're also going to give it rounded MD, and on hover we are going to give it bg indigo 700 and disabled opacity 50. So this is just going to go on and say the send of text, and we can the text of send, and then we can close up everything here. All right, so this is what we have here. Why do we have this warning over here? We have this warning, which is because of this class. So it's going to say h125. So oops, just gonna cancel this up and just go with the quick fix over here, which also resolves to 500 pixels. So let's give this a save. And now the next thing we need to do is just for us to inject this straight up inside the notes view. So I'm gonna come here and let's come right into the notes view. So let's come over to the view, and here in the view we have the notes view file over here. And I think we can just have this somewhere around here like this. Just gonna take this, and we can have this just after this div over here, which is gonna display the actual note card. So after this, we can just come further down here, and here we can go on to have the actual chat panel just like this. Now we have the chat panel here. Maybe we're going to switch also the outer layout, because now the outer layout is going to have the max width here. So we need to also update the classes that we have over here. And okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to bring in these classes here, and then we can have some fixes. So we have this is going to remain as it is, as it holds this. But what we're going to do is we're going to replace this with this that we have over here. Now we are missing one div. We have this, and we have this as well. And this is called grid course 2. So this is going to be grid course 2. So this is one that we have over there. And after this, we have the node form. And after the node form, we have this over here. And after this, we have over here. So let me see, we have this. So we want this to be at the right. So I'm going to close this up here like this. So the grid course 2, course span 2 is going to be for this. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it. Course span 2. I don't think this is it actually, but let's save this and have a quick preview. So here I'm going to say the npm start dev command, npm start dev command like this. And yeah, npm run stats, npm run stats. I keep messing this up. And yeah, npm run dev. Yeah, is that it? Yeah, so that's it finally. And I'm gonna refresh this, and we see we are meant to have our we are meant to have it here. So the layout is screwed. What I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna get it up from, I'm just gonna replace everything here from what we have from the GitHub. So you can just get it from the GitHub so that we can fix the layout, and I do not spend time debugging the layouts here. Okay, so so we can go on to save this, and now with this saved, yeah, so now we see chat with your nodes here. Cool. So we see it here, add something, and yeah, so we can actually try it out. I'm gonna go on with a note. I'm gonna have a note that we can test it out with. So I want to test this out with the real note. Okay, so I'm gonna have this over here as the title, and for the content, I'm gonna take this content over here, and it's quite long, and replace this over here. So this is real content that we could work with. So it could be any content AI generated. And I'm going to add the note. So this doesn't need any special functionality. This is the note over here. And then we can summarize the note over here. So let's see if this is still working as expected. And now it is done summarizing. We should see the summary defined somewhere here, which we do not see the summary. So let's come back here and make sure that we have everything up and running. So I'm just going to open this up, and let's make sure we have our server up and running. So here I'm going to say Supabase, oops, not deploy. We have the Supabase functions serve. So make sure that we have, yeah. So we want to make sure we have the Supabase function serve, the summarize node function. We have the env file, which is pointing over to the functions env, and then we know verify JWT. So make sure you have this up and running. And then I'm going to say over here in the new terminal, I'm going to say npm run dev to start up the dev server. Now this is up and running, and the next thing we need to do now is to test things out. Okay, so we're going to try it. I'm just going to refresh, and yeah, so I'm going to hit on summarize. Now we see summarizing because our function is up and running, and we should see our summary here if it's successful. Now it's not, it doesn't look like it was successful. We can always double check the reason why it's not successful. So I do not get any error message, and I do not also see anything here as a response. And if we give this a refresh, we also do not see any response here. We do not see any summary here. So let's double check what's going on. I'm just going to stop this for now and start it up again so that we are just double sure. And I'll also do the same here. I would also restart again, npm run dev. So now we have both up and running. I'm going to give this another trial. I'm going to hit on summarize. We see summarizing. We should see the summary here if it works fine. And yeah, actually it came here. So now this is our summary. So the design team kicked off the Q3 design system overhaul, opting to adopt ShadCN and sign. So this is a summary that we get from our notes. Now we can go into ask a question over here, like what are the next steps from the design meeting? So we can discuss with our own notes, and I'm going to drop it here. So this here, and I'm going to just add it here. So what are the next steps from the design meeting? And these are the next steps over here. So we're going to send this message. It's currently streaming, and that's why we see this placeholder here, and request failed 500. So now we are going to debug why our request is failing. And we do not see anything here per se as to why it is failing. So we do not get any error here. And the error is because we are not also starting up the server action. So the edge function. So if we come over to Supabase, we also have the summarize note, which is this over here that is currently up and running. So let me just extend this so that we can see this here, the summarize note. We need this embed note to also be up and running. So I'm going to take this, I'm just going to copy this so that we can reuse it. And I would open up another terminal window here. And I'll paste this in here. So npx Supabase functions serve, but we're not going to be serving the summarize note. We are going to be serving the embed note here. So we're going to say embed like this -notes. Okay, so now we want to also make sure this is up and running. env cannot start with Supabase, so it's keeping Supabase publishable key. We are not making use of any environment variable here. Okay, so we can just continue. Okay, so now let's try this. I'm going to come back here and then I'm going to take the question again and I'll drop the question here. Oops. So let me take the question again. I'm going to copy the question and just give this a refresh and I'll drop the question here based on this note. Now let's send this up again. It's currently streaming, and if it's successful this time around, because we have our edge function, you see the next step, but you saw it came in terms of stream because it was reading. The next steps from the design meeting are Sarah, as we have over here, typography, proposal by Friday. We also have James. We also have looping the engineering by Wednesday. And we also have the sprint planning that comes up on Thursday with the onboarding flow that must be set on the agenda. Now you can also ask more questions. So who is handling the color token migration, anything like this, and it's going to chat with your own note. So we send this, it's going to see and request failed. Now I think the request is failing at this point because of maybe rate limiting or something like that. But we have seen it work, so let's just double check. We did not get any error here, but my guess, my gut feeling is going to be this is currently failing due to rate limiting or any errors like that. So you're able to chat with your note, you can ask any questions, and immediately it's going to give you the response over here. So we have seen it work, and we see over here James is handling the color token migration. Now we're going to work on the deployment action of our section of our application, and you just want to come over to your GitHub. So this is my GitHub. Make sure you actually do give me a follow. Thank you as you do. And over here, we want to create a new repository. So we can come over to repositories over here, or maybe we can just click here and new repository like this so that we come straight up into here. We're going to give this a name. I'm going to give this a name of Vue.js Notes AI. And visibility is going to be public so everybody can see. And then I'm going to create the repository here. So now we're going to have the link. So this is the link. So I'm just going to say, first we want to make sure you have Git here. I'm going to stop all the functions that we have running. I'm going to quit this. I'm also going to quit this over here and make sure I stop the terminal. And I'm also going to quit this. So you want to say git add. If you haven't done git init, you want to say git init first. So I already have git initialized as I was working on the project. So I'm going to say git add. And then you want to say git commit -m. So git commit -m. And then you also always want to go with a very much more descriptive name. I'll just go with fit here, and I would say chat feature, chat AI streaming, anything like this, streaming feature. And now we have this done. We want to say git push. Okay, so it's not going to work yet because we need to sync it over here. So git remote at origin. I'm just going to copy this like this, and I would say git push. Now git push is going to fail for me. I just wanted to give me the command to set upstream to be origin main. So I'm going to copy this and say git push dash set upstream to be origin main. So we'll give this a moment, and now it has been pushed over to Git. So once you refresh this, you should see this populated here with your GitHub. So I'm just going to zoom in a bit quite here. And now we have this over here. The next step is for us to deploy this over to Vercel. Okay, so I'm going to open up my Vercel project here. So here I'm going to create a new project. And this is the project over here, and these are most of my projects that we have here. So I'm going to import this newly created project here, and I'm going to go with the name of view notes AI. And environment variables, we actually do have some environment variables that we need to set over here. So let's come over here and let's open up our .env, our root env here. I'm just going to copy all of these just like this. Then I'm going to add the environment variables here. So the Supabase URL, the key, and also the Gemini API key. So let's go on and deploy this. We have this deployed, and we give this a moment. It's going to go on and run some build logs over here. These are the different steps. So we're just going to give this a moment, and it's going to clone into our project, and it's going to install the different dependencies. And once it's done installing the dependencies, it's going to run the build command, and I'll see you once the project is done building. So you see, it's done for me, and now our project has been deployed. Let's have a view of our project. We can come over to the dashboard, and in the dashboard we're going to see the domain. So this is the domain we get by default. I'm going to click into this domain, and here you need to authenticate. So I'll just go with the test@test.com email that we used throughout the course, and the password over here. And now I am authenticated. We are going to see our UI. Cool. All right, so let's test this out. I'm going to provide this title over here. As you can see, we have this new, I did test before now, so it's working as expected. And I'm also going to drop this as well, this content over here, and let's add this note. We are going to see our node added here, which is cool. So there's everything is working well. We can also try out the edit functionality. I'll just add a couple few exclamation mark here and save. We see the exclamation marks appear, and once we hit on summarize, AI is going to generate our summary. So cool, this is working as expected. Now let's ask a question. I'm going to ask, what is the P0 issue? P0 issue. What is the P0 issue? This script. Okay. So this print. So I'm going to copy this and ask this question over here with the question mark here. Send this off, and it's going to stream the question, and we see the P0 issue for this print and what the fix is. So this is working. Everything is working as expected. So this is the application we have built together. I'm just going to drop another question. If you have any question, please do let me know in the comment section, okay? And then we can go through it together. If you're new here, do not forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. I look forward to seeing you in future builds. Until then, take care and bye-bye.